Yeah, let's get this going, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, obviously, we have, what, 6 teams on bye? Some pretty damn good offenses. We have the Niners collapsing. We still don't know if Vlad McConkey is going to be playing or not. I guess maybe the good news that you have is, according to Ian Rappaport, Mike Evans won't have any limitations. Like, we can go ahead and pull this up, but that's really the only positive news that we've had so far this week. Now, Daniel Jones prefers to sign with a playoff contender. Why? Realistically speaking, if you're Daniel Jones, what playoff contending roster would bring you in as a quarterback upgrade? The Niners believe Brock Purdy's right shoulder should be able to go for week 13. We're really hoping so. For the love of God, please, Purdy, be good. Malik Neighbors expected to play week 12, so you should have Neighbors. Keenan Allen expected to play week 12 as well. And Ian Rappaport says that Mike Evans won't have any restrictions in week 12. So, pretty positive news on that front. Now, obviously, it's wrapped up with a bunch of negative as well. But let's go through and let's dive into all the questions that we have here. Let's try to answer everything that we can. Now, we are going to be able to get to a bunch of questions in the live chat as well. If you look at the questions on the site that we have to get through, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the queue. I'm sure there'll be some more that come in as we stream. But we should be able to answer a bunch of questions in the live chat. Should be able to answer every question through the site as always. But again, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with us. Appreciate y'all, and we'll be excited to try to help you out today. But anyway, Dez coming through with our first question. Here we're looking at A-Rich versus Jordan Love. So obviously A-Rich absolutely crushed us last week from a fantasy football perspective. Comes through with the multiple rushing touchdowns. This matchup going up against the Lions should be one in which we see a ton of Richardson dropbacks. I mean, it's not necessarily a spot where we can expect that they're going to be able to run the ball with Jonathan Taylor. I think we'd be very surprised if they can. So I understand possibly wanting to go with Anthony Richardson. You compare this to the Packers, where the Packers are pretty heavy favorites, or maybe they're a little bit more run heavy going up against the Niners with no Purdy. But to be honest with you, I'm not going to overthink it. I'm still going to go Jordan Love. Going over to what we have at tight ends, we are going to be going with K. Dotton over Sam Laporta. I know we looked at the picks with Laporta previously. I haven't seen the projections with K. Dotton. K. Dotton, they have higher, lower 45.5 receiving yards. Versus Sam Laporta, you're currently sitting higher, lower 35.5. I really hope Laporta crushes the dude. I need him in my own league. I need him in my best ball teams. But reality is just this is going to be a rush first offense in Detroit, or it's not like Laporta's commanded a ton of target volume this year. Going down to the flex, you have no Alvin Kamara. So I think Harrison, honestly, out of this little grouping, will be an absolute must-start player. But you have no Kamara, you have no Shakir. No way in hell I start Wan'Dale Robinson as the wide receiver 2 in New York. So it's between Juwan Jennings and Rico Dowdle. If you had Brock Purdy good to go, I think we could very easily say that we want to go ahead. We want to take Juwan Jennings. Jennings, 11 targets over the past 2 weeks, has absolutely crushed. Now, obviously, an issue that you have with this is now the offense is supposed to be pretty bad in San Francisco. But the offense is also supposed to be very bad in Dallas. I think the offense in Dallas will be worse. They are currently 10.5-point dogs. But can y'all please let me know in the live chat, would you rather have Rico Dowdle or would you rather have Juwan Jennings in your starting lineup? Are you going with Dowdle or are you going with Jennings? Please let me know. We have Dowdle, Watson. I'm not going Watson. I know he had the 150 receiving yards last week, but he had 4 targets. Dowdle, Jennings, Dowdle, Jennings, Dowdle, Jennings, Dowdle, Jennings, Dowdle. So it looks like it's literally split 50-50. I think it's up to you. When in doubt, I'm typically going to go with the guy that is at the running back position. If we were just chasing guaranteed touches in a bad offense, it'd be different, of course, if you had no Debo, but you still do have a considerable amount of target volume for Jennings. I'm sorry, target competition. And if you think about Jennings this past week, not panicking by this for whatever reason. Main reason I'm panicking is because of no Purdy. But you also had no Kittle last week propping up Jennings as well. Now, moving over to our next question, coming out from Hogan. Always happy to see it, my guy. Says, need a flex. Quarterbacks on the waiver wire, Minshew and B. Allen. Who the hell is B. Allen at quarterback? Should we switch? Are you talking about the quarterback in San Fran? Never mind. I thought you were talking about Braylon Allen, then my mind went to Josh Allen. So essentially, are we going to go with the backup for the Niners, or are we going to go Cooper Rush? I would go the backup for the Niners rather than Cooper Rush. The thing is, even if you are a garbage quarterback, you still do have Kyle Shanahan. You still do have George Kittle, Jawan Jennings, Debo Samuel, CMC. Going down to the flex, we sadly don't have any updated news with Ladd McConkey. I would still start Ladd and Tracy here. Obviously, if you were to have no Ladd on Monday night, there is a clear pivot that you could make where you could pivot over to Joshua Palmer. It sucks that you don't have the clarity. I'm assuming that Ladd McConkey is going to play, but by no means is it a guarantee. The thing is, it's just such a good matchup, however, that if he does play, I think you can safely assume that he absolutely crushes. Okay. Max says, where do you read questions from? So we're going to be able to go back and forth with the live chat as well, because we don't have too many questions on the site at the moment. But if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed question answered, these are all through flockfantasy.com. You can always ask a question. You don't even have to be in the live stream to ask a question, because as soon as we answer it, it is sent over to you through the site. But you can just hit the link where it says ask a question here in the live chat. Or if you go over to flockfantasy.com and just hit the button top right corner that says personal advice, there you can send in a super message, a start set question, a trade question, or get a full-blown team review. Now, of course, I know you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but if you wanted a team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick for tonight, more than less than half a total yard. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. And I will show you all my favorite pick on Underdog for today. But I want to remind y'all again that I am 0 for 1,000 on our last 1,000 Underdog calls. We are due, though. I'll say that much. But we are looking at higher than 55.5 receiving yards on Mike Evans, who should have zero limitations, was cleared early in the week, and obviously should see the expanded target share with no Chris Godwin. So personally, that's what I would be looking at here. But you can find that link in the live chat that says free Matthew Stafford pick. But let's move this over. Our next question, also coming out from Hogan. It says, locked in for the playoffs. Will this help my run? So pivoting from Brian Robinson to Aaron Jones is kind of a lateral move and up to you. Obviously, where we're looking at the expanded role that we've had for Cam Akers, at least this past week, maybe it's a little bit concerning for what you should expect to have with Aaron Jones. But, and real quick also, Adam says, sports betting isn't allowed in my state, so do I just pay for a team review then? Underdog is not sports betting. Underdog is daily fantasy sports. So Underdog should be available in 90% of your states. I mean, I've lived in Texas, Florida. Underdog's available in both of those, whereas like DraftKings Sportsbook isn't. And same thing, like Underdog's in California. So more likely than not, you actually do have Underdog in your state. But anyway, Brian Robinson to Aaron Jones, I think it's a lateral move up to you. Again, I understand the hesitation that someone would have with Aaron Jones. But the thing is, you are looking at a running back that was injured 2 weeks ago, and that may have something to do with the Cam Akers usage last week. Going from Flowers to Malik Neighbors, while Flowers is in a much better offense, it's an offense that will look to run the ball consistently. Flowers has been very much up and down this year with his target volume, whereas Malik Neighbors is leading the NFL in targets per game. So for me, I would go ahead. I would take the Aaron Jones and Malik Neighbors side. It's not a super easy call by any means, but I think you can go with it. Now, Leandro Lewis coming out with our next question says, also, please start Goddard or Jennings in the flex. Flex, I definitely go Brian Robinson if that is an option. Here, wide receiver, we have no Higgins, we have no London, we have no Adams. It's Jennings or Quentin Johnston. I'm going to go with Juwan Jennings. It sucks. And again, I have a ridiculous amount of Quentin Johnston in Underdog Best Ball Draft. So I really hope that Quentin Johnston continues to do what he has been. Like, he's actually winning us a decent amount of money right now. But I'm not super hopeful in it, just because if you look at the underlying target volume for Quentin Johnston in comparison to what you have with just the touchdowns that have been coming through, it does really look like he is just sitting here with an unsustainable touchdown rate that should come back down to earth. So for me, I would go Jennings. And again, if I had to choose between Juwan Jennings, Dallas Goedert, I would still go Jennings over Goddard despite the Devonta Smith injury, as well as despite the Brock Purdy injury. But I would rather play Brian Robinson over both of them, where if we can just keep our flex as is. Now, Pure coming out with their next question says, considering Tracy over Taylor and flex is a question mark. I personally would not start Tracy here. I understand that Taylor's in a much tougher matchup, but if we are looking at the two running backs, neither of them's going to have a receiving role. The Colts project to be a better offense this week. And for me personally, I just think that Taylor is the much more talented running back. So for me, I would still go Jonathan Taylor over Tracy. And down in the flex spot, honestly, I think I'd rather have Dobbins over Tracy here. We're obviously have to be slightly concerned about what we are going to see with the Gus Edwards volume. This is also a situation in which you actually expect to have probably a little bit more passing volume in Baltimore in comparison to what we've seen in the past. Now, with that being said, Dobbins will be the receiving back. It projects to be the highest scoring game in the NFL this week. So I think I'd probably go Dobbins. Is it the easiest call in the world? Definitely not, but it is what it is. Now, Cindy coming through with our next question says, I sat Judy. Smith is out after Thursday. Waiver wire is Pittman, Douglas, Allen, Wandale, Leggett, Palmer, and Pierce. If I had to pick somebody up off the waiver wire there, which we actually do, we have no Smith, we have no Judy, we have no Thomas, we have no London. We are going to go ahead and take Michael Pittman Jr. Now, while obviously it does appear that Josh Downs is the wide receiver one in this offense, and I would rank Downs at that spot, to be fair to Pittman, he did see the majority of the targets last week in this offense. So he still does have a decent role. And if you're looking at what we should expect when it comes to the overall offensive output, I do think that it's a situation where the Colts trail the vast majority of this game. It's very difficult to run the ball against the Detroit Lions in the first place. So I would actually expect the Colts to be a little bit more of a pass-happy offense this week in comparison to what you have with them most weeks. So yeah, I would go ahead and I would play Pittman over those secondary options. It's not like those other options aren't great offenses by any means. Now, Steve McQueen says, Terry my choice, but DJ and Waddle with the nice matchups. Also, Nico's matchup is scary. What are your thoughts? You still go with Nico Collins, absolutely regardless. We are, of course, going to maybe expect this to be a spot where the Texans aren't playing in a super high-scoring game environment, where they probably can run the ball as well, knowing that Tennessee is not going to be able to put points up on the board. But I think you assume Nico plays over 50% of the snaps. I think you have to play him. And then I think you also have to play Terry McLaurin here relatively easily as well. Where if you're going through and looking at what sportsbooks are projecting this week, they are projecting the Commanders to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL. So if that is the expectation, I think you have to be much higher on Terry McLaurin than you would be otherwise. Or at least than you were last week. But let me pivot over and answer some of the questions that we have in the live chat. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Would be happy to try to get to as many as I possibly can. And also, if you have not done so already, go down there, hit that like button. I mean, we live stream every single day. I've not missed a single day of live streaming in probably 150 days. We have not missed a single day of live streaming during the NFL season in 5 years. But Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you were ever going to hit that like button, I would kindly ask y'all to do it now if possible. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's check this out. We got one question, Tracy or Aaron Jones. For me, I'm not super pumped with Tyrone Tracy. Again, I mean, what we've pretty much seen from Tracy over the past 2 months is a running back that's going to have a role as a first and second down grinder and what is a relatively bad offense or a very bad offense, and he won't have much receiving usage. So for me, I think Tracy's a touchdown or bust running back in a bad offense. And I don't know how excited I am for that. Like, at least with Aaron Jones, we have the receiving role. You're in a better offense as well. So I think I'm going to go ahead. I'll take Aaron Jones over Tracy. Now, let's move this over. Ricky says, Kyron or DK Metcalf, there's no scenario in which you don't play Kyron Williams. I understand with Kyron, the red zone tendencies of this offense have changed. Where you've seen them pivot over to be much more pass happy at the goal line, which is not super exciting if you are somebody that wants Kyron Williams touchdowns. But Kyron at the same time is still seeing every single touch and every single snap out of this backfield. So I think you still have to take the 3-down running back in the good offense. Now, of course, touchdowns have been going elsewhere. And at the same time, I don't know. It's a tough matchup against Philly. I just don't see how you could ever bench a running back with every single snap. Now, Mallow says, flex, half PPR. We're going to go Dobbins, Rome, or Downs. So, obviously, you do have improvement here if we are looking at Romeo. Now, with that being said, still not somebody that I think you could really consider at all, to be honest. Where, I mean, this is a wide receiver that's still having to compete with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore for targets. You're in a 3-man platoon, really. And you're in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Now, there's definitely more hope that you have a change with the offensive coordinator here. Caleb does look a little bit better. But let me pull something up for you real quick. Implied team totals, week 12. Let's just see if this has changed, because I haven't seen this morning. And obviously, sportsbook lines, sportsbook projections change all the way up until kickoff. But like here, let's go through and let's look at what's supposed to be the highest scoring games, highest scoring offenses versus lowest scoring. So right now, the offenses that are supposed to be the highest scoring units in the NFL this week. You have the Lions, the Commanders, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Packers, the Texans, Seahawks, Chargers. And then you kind of have a teardrop. Going down to the worst offenses in the league with how they projected. Obviously, the Browns may be a little bit different now because we actually know how they performed. But the lowest scoring offenses this week, according to projections, were the Panthers, Browns, Titans, Cowboys, Giants, Bears. The Bears have an implied team total about 17.5 points. The over-under on this game is currently sitting at, what? 39.5. 39.5 points for the over-under Chicago and Minnesota. Whereas if we're going to go over and look at Baltimore and Los Angeles, you're at 50.5. Should be a much better game environment. If you're looking at J.K. Dobbins, while you do have to compete with Gus Edwards, it's not going to be the end of the world here by any stretch of the imagination. Dobbins still has the receiving usage. So I think you go with Dobbins. Now let's move this over. Red Hood says, good morning. Full PPR. We going to go Worthy or Jennings? Tough spot to be in. Obviously, much lowered expectations with this offense in San Francisco at this point. You've had back-to-back games with 11 targets. I really don't know. I probably still go Jennings over Worthy. I do think it's obviously a lot closer than it would have been at the very beginning of the week. Now, Jennings or Jamison Williams. Here, I think you would pivot over to Jamison. Jamison, touchdown or bust, running back. But with that being said, of course, touchdown or bust receiver, you need the big play to be there. But if you were ever looking at somebody that you want the big play from, it would be somebody in this Detroit Lions offense. So I think you can go ahead and look at Jamison as a viable option. Now, let's see. Jaden says, Boutte, Henry, or Amir Abdullah for the flex. Can I see what the projections are for Amir Abdullah on Underdog real quick? Let's look at all these guys. Kayshon Boutte is currently at higher lower 33.5 receiving yards. There's no way that you ever start this dude. His higher lower is 6.45 fantasy points. Amir Abdullah is higher lower 32.5 rushing yards. You should have receiving usage, though. He's higher lower 55.5 total yards. Higher lower about 8.5 fantasy points. And then if you're looking at Hunter Henry is higher lower 44.5 receiving yards. So again, not only is Kayshon Boutte not worth the roster spot, there's no way in hell that you would ever start this guy. So for me, I think I end up playing Amir Abdullah. Again, I don't want to act like we're super excited about it because with Abdullah here, you don't exactly know what the workload's going to be like. It really is just a projection. But what we do know is it's a bad matchup and it's a garbage offense. So even if he were to have the workload, it's not like you're super excited anyway. Yeah, probably go Abdullah, but for the love of God, Kayshon Boutte is not interesting. Now, let's see. We got Kittle or McBride. If we had Brock Purdy good to go, I would go with George Kittle, but they were going to be in the same tier for us regardless. Now at this point, I think you can kind of safely say that you want to go ahead and you want to take Trey McBride. Like they're both on the Mount Rushmore, but you should have a much better offense here in Arizona at this point. But let me move over and see if we have any more questions on the site that we need to get through. And then, of course, we'll get back to the questions that we have in the live chat. Again, I want to remind y'all, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, hit that like button. We live stream every single day without missing a single day forever. And it looks like about 10% of y'all have actually hit that like button. So thank you so much for everybody supporting the channel. Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. And obviously, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer to any of your questions, you'd always go hit the personal advice button in the top right corner of flockfantasy.com, or you can hit the link in the live chat that says ask a question here. And if you go over and hit that link, it'll take you to this page. You can send in a super message, a start set question, a trade question, or a team review. Again, if you wanted a team review, I would recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy just because it's going to be so much cheaper. Or if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. And you'll be getting that free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I know who to credit with that free team review voucher. But let's go ahead, refresh this, see if we have any questions coming in. If not, we'll pivot back over to the chat. We have 4 questions to get through real quick. Let's go ahead and dive into these. Now, this question coming out from J $, longtime member of the flock. Appreciate you, excited to check this out. Saying Abdullah or Roschon. I'm definitely going to go Amir Abdullah over Roschon Johnson. I mean, if DeAndre Swift was injured, give me Roschon relatively easily. I think Roschon's the better running back. I think the Bears have the better offense. And Roschon would have a receiving role and a goal line role, and Roschon would crush. The issue, of course, is with DeAndre Swift. He is healthy. Everybody else in Las Vegas is injured. So, not super excited about Amir Abdullah by any means, but I definitely think you play him over somebody like Roschon Johnson. Now, T. Lewis coming out with our next question says, Goddard, Douglas, or pick up Wandale for the second flex? I definitely go with Goddard over Wandale. Like, the thing with Wandale Robinson, while I'm rooting for him, while if he continues to play well, will help my underdog teams a ton. Realistically speaking, he's the wide receiver 2 for Tommy DeVito. Are we excited about that? No, not at all. But here, wide receiver, we have no Smith, we have no Shakir, we have no Olave, we have no Brown. So, yeah, I think really the only option that you have is to go with Dallas Goedert. Am I super, super excited about Goedert? Probably not. Of course, the benefit that you have with Goddard is the fact that you have no Devonta Smith, so we should expect an expanded role in comparison to what we have previously had. Now, Rish Ivswan, Nathan, sorry if I can't read, my friend, coming out with a start set question. Here, tight end, we are currently starting Zach Ertz. You have no Ferguson. I think you can maybe drop Ferguson if you have an exciting pickup off the waiver wire. Down in the flex, we are currently planning on starting Josh Downs. We have no Jamar Chase. We have no Amari Cooper. We have no Jake Ferguson. We have no Bijan Robinson this week. We already benched Nick Chubb. So yeah, Downs, it's really between him, Bucky Irving, and Juwan Jennings. I personally would rather have Josh Downs. I mean, I still am a little bit worried about the passing volume that we'll have in Indianapolis. But with that being said, I mean, Downs has cemented himself as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And then going over and looking at what we have elsewhere, I really don't see any other pivots you could potentially make. Obviously, we are starting Jalen Hurts with zero hesitation, even with the Devonta Smith injury. Now, Big Route, always happy to see it, says Kate Otten or Dallas Goedert in a full PPR format this week. So if you go over and look at my rankings on the sites, you'll see that I do have them pretty much ranked back to back here. These are the average expert. If you sort by mine, I have Dallas Goedert at 5, Cade Otton here at 7, obviously. Now, hindsight being 2020, we would have ranked Otton ahead of David Njoku. But they're really close post Mike Evans and Devonta Smith news. Looking at the projection for Dallas Goedert, he is currently higher, lower 48.5 receiving yards on Underdog. Cade Otton currently is higher, lower 45.5 receiving yards. Otton's more likely to see the touchdown, however. I think it is up to you. I think both are great plays. I probably go Dallas Goedert because you have no Devonta Smith, and they're telling us that Mike Evans won't have any hesitation or any limitations. But again, I think it is very close, and it very much is up to you on that. But I would go Goddard if it was my team. But we got Kyle coming through with a massive dono. Thank you so much, my guy. I really do appreciate it. But if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll be trying to answer as many questions as we can. I think we are all caught up on questions on the site. Obviously, we'll pivot back over to the site to get any guaranteed answers to questions as need be. 44 MSU asking Audric Estime or Amir Abdullah. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not super excited. I'm not telling everybody you need to start Amir Abdullah this week. But in my mind, if you're starting him over running backs that we're pretty certain are the running back 2 in their own backfield, I think you can do so. Like, again, if you're looking at Amir Abdullah versus Roschon Johnson, if you're looking at Amir Abdullah versus Audric Estime here, I think this is the scenario in which, yeah, you probably just go ahead and you probably just play Abdullah. Now, let's move this over. Josh says, good morning, Devin Singletary or Kayshon Boutte in a full PPR format. Okay, this is where you could start Kayshon Boutte. I'm Devin Singletary. There's just no way in hell you could ever start the running back 2 in an offense with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. For a team that is 5.5, 6-point dogs, where we'd assume that they more likely than not are going to have to be throwing the ball in the second half and probably can't run. Now, Derek says Bucky or Marvin Harrison Jr. Looking at Harrison, obviously he's been very much up and down so far this season. You really haven't had the target volume since back in weeks 2 and 3. Now, with that being said, I really do like the game environment, and I really like the matchup here going up against Seattle. This could very easily be a high-scoring contest. Spread in this game is only a point as well, so you could see it being a close game where you actually do have to have a considerable amount of Kyler dropbacks. Where obviously the last few games that we've had with the Cardinals, they have just blown out their opponents and have been able to just run the ball consistently with backup running backs in the second half. I don't really expect that to be the case here. Okay. Taylor asking, are we going to go Debo Samuel or Romeo Doubs? For me, I think that there's no way that you could play Romeo Doubs over Debo. Completely understand the hesitation that you'd have with the Niners offense. Completely understands Debo Samuel's been disappointing as of late as well. But, I mean, Romeo Doubs gives you a floor of 0 points. Going through and looking at the projections this week. Debo Samuel is currently sitting higher, lower, 58.5 total yards. Where if you hate Debo or you hate this offense, go take the lower than 58.5 yards. But don't be starting Romeo Doubs over him. Where Romeo Doubs is higher, lower, 40 yards. And again, the floor you get with Doubs is literally 0 points. Okay. Let's move this over. Mahdi says, start Herbert or Baker. We are going to go ahead. We are going to most likely... It's really tough. I think you can go in either direction, to be completely honest. It's a really good matchup for Justin Herbert. Obviously, it's been a team that hasn't really asked Herbert to drop back a ton so far this season. But specifically in this matchup, you would imagine that he's going to have to against Baltimore in what should be the highest scoring game of the week. Whereas, yes, Baker has been better this season in fantasy, and at the same time, you have Mike Evans coming back in, which is very exciting. But I think we go Herbert over Baker, given the matchups that you have. Now, let's see. Joe says JT or Mike Evans. So, really tough matchup for Jonathan Taylor here going up against Detroit. It's a spot in which we would expect that you probably have more passing volume in Indianapolis than rushing production. Now, with that being said, I would still probably want you to go ahead and play Jonathan Taylor over Evans his first week back. Now, again, 99% of scenarios, I am starting Mike Evans. I'm not trying to make it seem like anybody here should be worried about him. But if we are going to try to be objective about it, we can say that this is a similar spot to what we had with Nico Collins last week, where Nico Collins last week, they told us he was going to be at 100%. And what we ended up seeing was him play fewer than 50% of the snaps. So, I don't know. It's a spot in which I don't think you can be looking at Evans over the running backs. They're going to see every single snap and every single touch out of their backfield, such as Kyron Williams and Jonathan Taylor, even if both running backs have reasons to be worried about them individually. Now let's smooth this over. We got a question. Are we going to start Jennings or DeAndre Hopkins? If you had a fully healthy Brock Purdy, I think you can go ahead and I think you can make an argument for Jennings. But now, in comparison of the two, Hopkins should be playing in one of the best offenses in the league this week. Jennings should be in one of the worst offenses in the league this week. So for me, I would go ahead. I'd play DeAndre Hopkins over Juwan Jennings. Mustafa says Roschon or Aaron Jones if Swift is out. Is there a threat for DeAndre Swift to miss? Last I saw, DeAndre Swift was set up to play this week. Let me go ahead and pull this up because this is the second question we've had where I've been surprised with how excited people are about Roschon Johnson. I hope Roschon crushes. Roschon's a top 3 invested running back for me in underdog drafts this year. I mean, I have Swift in the flock league, but I picked up Roschon as well, so I'm chilling, pivoting over to Roschon if need be. Let me just pull up DeAndre Swift on Twitter and see if there's anything. Yeah, I don't see any additional news regarding DeAndre Swift making it seem like he is going to miss. Last I saw with Swift, he was set up to play. Last I saw with Swift, he's going to play. I mean, I can see if we have an underdog pick out on the Bears right now. If they don't have Swift projections up or Roshan projections up, I think that would maybe give a little more credence to him possibly missing. Swift's only at 66.5 total yards, higher or lower, which is extremely low in comparison to what he's usually at. And they don't have any Roshan projections up. Actually, they do, but they don't have any yardage ones. So maybe there's a little bit of worry of Swift missing, but obviously we'll get confirmation very, very soon. But let's move this over. And again, let me reiterate, we'll get to all the guaranteed questions that are asked on the sites. And if you wanted to get any questions answered at 100% guarantee, you could always just hit the link in the live chat that says ask a question here, or you can go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the personal advice button in the top right corner, and then there you can send in a super message, start set question, trade question, or get a full-blown team review. But again, I want to reiterate, if you are wanting that full team review, I would definitely take advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, just because it is going to be a lot cheaper for you to do so, where it only is a $10 deposit. Where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. And you'll be getting that free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night, where all you got to do is make sure you make that $10 deposit on Underdog, set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address so we know who to credit that free team review voucher with. And if you were looking at some of my favorite Underdog picks this week, we're probably going to be looking at Debo Samuel and Mike Evans. Debo to go fewer than 58.5 total yards, and Evans to go higher than 55.5. But I do want to reiterate, of course, that we've been absolutely smoked when it comes to our underdog picks for all season now. So probably want to be fading us rather than tailing us. But let's move this over and see if we have any guaranteed questions coming through the site, such as the super message, start set question, whatever it may be. And here we have a trade question coming out from PPAV. Says, did this trade last night? How did I do? Thank you. Thank you. My guy will be excited to check this out. Going from Lamb to Puka, clear upgrade in my mind, given the injury that we have to Dak. Going from Bucky to Rashad White. In my mind, I'd rather have White, but I do think that they are pretty close. And then going from Pacheco to Tony Pollard, I believe is a clear downgrade for the fantasy football playoffs, when we'll have Pacheco at 100%, and when we will have Tajay Spears coming back in and taking more usage again. From Tony Pollard. So the best player is Puka. The scenario in which I think you make this deal is if you're in a spot where you need to actually have production right this second, where you can't be thinking about production in the long term. Where if you can't afford to think about production in the long term, it does make sense to pivot over to Tony Pollard instead of Pacheco. Now, Phoenix Lance, always happy to see us, says Mayor Stroud, keep going back and forth, might have a pass positive game script, but Vegas has Houston's offense projected better, must win game. So yeah, you'd have an implied team total about 19.5 points here in New England. Drake May's been better than what you've had with CJ Stroud so far this season as well. I mean, we can go through and we can look at the underdog picks too, Where the thing with May in comparison to Stroud is obviously May, you're going to get a little more rushing involvement. Stroud, you're at higher, lower 17.05 points. May, you're at higher, lower 17.05 points. So pretty much they are identical. Going over and looking at my rankings on the site, I already know I'm going to have CJ Stroud higher. My hope with Stroud is we end up seeing a little more passing volume in this offense when you have, you know what, I need to move Stroud down. The thing is, you look at the spread on this game, it is a large one. I do think that they are much closer. I still probably go Stroud. I'm hoping that it's a little bit of a pass happier offense. As you get Nico Collins ramped up to 100%. Where obviously Nico only played, I think, 47% of the snaps this past week. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Drake May or CJ Stroud in your starting lineup this week? Are you going to go Drake May or CJ Stroud in your starting lineup this week? We have May, Stroud, May, Stroud. Stroud, May, May, Stroud, May, Stroud. Stroud, May, Stroud, May, Stroud, May, Stroud. Again, I have CJ Stroud ranked slightly higher. It does look like the chat's pretty split as well. I do think you can honestly do whatever you were wanting on this front. 6-point passing touchdown format, I think it's easier to go with Stroud. 4-point passing touchdown league, a little bit closer. Nick, always happy to see him. My guy says, bye week killing me this week. Are we going to go Kyler or Herbert today? For me, 4-point passing touchdown format, I'm going to go ahead and take the quarterback that has the rushing upside. I'm going to go ahead and take Kyler Murray here. Looking at the rest of the starting lineup, just in case there's anything else that you potentially wanted to pivot. I'm not a big fan of looking at Christian Watson inside the starting lineup, but honestly, we have no option. We have Kamara, James Cook, Brian Thomas, and Garrett Wilson all on bye. So, yeah, really a tough spots. But, I mean, you at least have the ceiling with Kyler where you could very easily see a 30-point performance if we have a couple of the rushing touchdowns there. Now, let's move this over to our next question coming out from CM98. Says, Gino or Anthony Richardson, Laporta, Disley, or Jonnu in a PPR format? Thanks. Thank you. Between Gino and AR, I'll probably go with Geno Smith. I think Richardson probably has the higher ceiling. Again, should be a spot in which you do have a considerable amount of passing attempts. In Seattle, should be a closer scoring game going up against the Cardinals. I mean, with Richardson, you should have a ton of passing attempts going up against the Lions. There should be definitely more of a blowout where the Colts trail. We've seen Richardson come through with rushing production in the past and really get there from a fantasy perspective. But of course, a big issue with that is we've also seen the incredibly low floor games from Richardson that you haven't had with Geno. And then at tight end, I think I actually go with Will Disley, because I think Disley and Laporta should project out similarly if you have Ladd McConkey playing. Whereas if Ladd McConkey, who potentially could miss, is out, then at that point, I think it's Will Disley relatively easily over Sam Laporta. Obviously, great matchup, great environment here. So I'm going to go with Geno and Disley. Now, Sal coming out with our next question says, must-win week, don't know who to start at the flex. So going down to the second flex spot, we have Javonte in a pretty damn good matchup. Chase Brown on bye, Jalen Warren's already played, Brian Thomas on bye, Darnell Mooney on bye, Devonta Smith's out. So I think you go ahead. I think you take Javonte Williams. I will reiterate that I'm pretty concerned that you don't have a massive workload with Javonte. I know he gets there this past week, but they had been talking up Audric Estime a ton. And while Javonte crushed a week ago, it was a spot in where he only had 14 total opportunities. So I don't think it's a super easy decision, but it's a really good matchup against the Raiders. So I think you can go with him. Now, 3Pete coming out with their next question says, thinking of starting Anthony Richardson for the upside. I don't know if you just needed one quarterback or two here. For me, I would go Tua. Again, we can pull this up, but this is a big reason why we were in on Tyreek Hill last week. This is a big reason why we were in on Tua last week. If you look at how sportsbooks are currently projecting out this Dolphins offense, sportsbooks are back to projecting the Dolphins offense as one of the better offenses in the NFL. I mean, right now, if you're looking at what you have, I believe the only offenses that project out to score more points than Miami this week are going to be the Lions and Commanders. So for me, I would go ahead and I would play Tua here, where you actually have the same projection for Miami as you do with KC. And then obviously you have the Colts down this list a considerable amount. Now, of course, Richardson has the rushing upside that you're not going to get from Tua. And at the same time, you could potentially see the running backs take more in Miami with Achane than you could see with Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis based off the matchups that the two offenses have. But I still personally would go Tua over Richardson. But let's move this over and answer some more of the questions that we have in the live chat. Please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'd be happy to try to answer as many as we possibly can. And also, of course, if you have not done so, hit that like button. We live stream every single day. I have not missed a single day of live streaming in God knows how long, like 5 years straight of live streaming every single day during the NFL season. But Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you were ever going to hit that like button, I'd kindly ask for you to do it now. Wade says, what is the meaning of life? Maybe if you ask the question through the site, we can get you something there, but I don't know if we got you right now. Now, let's see. We got Jonnu Smith or Jacoby Myers this week. Obviously, Jonnu absolutely blows up last week. Myers is in a relatively tough matchup as well. But to be completely honest, very rarely are we wanting to ever go through and throw a tight end into the flex spot. And I'm definitely not wanting to put a tight end that you just picked up off the waiver wire in that flex. So for me, I would just go ahead. I would play Jacoby Myers. I don't want to make it seem like it's the easiest thing in the world, however, because obviously it is a pretty tough matchup for Myers, arguably the toughest matchup you're going to see all year. And you do have a considerable amount of target volume going over to Brock Bowers, of course. But let's move this over. Timbo Trade says Tony Pollard or DeAndre Swift. I think you can make a strong argument to go ahead and to just take Tony Pollard, where if you are looking at Pollard, this is a running back that you have no Spears in his backfield, so you're going to see every single snap. I mean, not every single snap, but the 3 weeks you had no you had no Spears, Tony Pollard had 80+% of the snaps in his backfield. So I think you can go ahead and take Pollard in that instance. Pollard or JSN. Again, I think you should be excited about the just guaranteed raw amount of opportunities that Tony Pollard should have. Now, am I super excited to go ahead and tell you to play him over JSN, who should be in a much better offense? No, I think JSN maybe has higher ceiling, but I do think you get the higher floor with Tony Pollard. So as you have no Spears, I think you could go Tony Pollard here, because the 3 weeks, again, that you had no Tajay Spears previously, Pollard did see 80+% of the snaps every week. So let's move this over. Dior says Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix. So clearly Bo Nix over the past month has been a much better fantasy option than Jaden Daniels. But do not get it twisted. Jaden Daniels is still a much better play than Bo Nix this week. Right now, you do have the Commanders projecting to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. They're 10.5-point favorites. You go through and look at Bo Nix on Underdog. He's higher or lower 17.5 fantasy points. You go ahead and look at Jaden Daniels in comparison. Jaden Daniels is higher or lower about 21 fantasy points. They're not even in the same tier. I understand that Bo Nix has been better as of late. Daniels hasn't run the ball over the past 2 weeks. Daniels has had 2 really tough matchups over the past 2 weeks. But if you take a step back and look at it, you have a lot more rushing upside with Jaden Daniels than you do with Bo Nix. I think you have to go through. I think you have to take him. Okay. Mr. Burger Boss says Jamison Williams or Jawan Jennings this week. For me, I think I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Jamison. With Jamison, boom, bust, touchdown or bust, wide receiver, where if you get the big play, you're happy. If the big play is not there, you're screwed. But again, if you were ever expecting the big play to be there, it would be in the Detroit Lions offense with Jamison Williams. I think you would go with the guy that has the guaranteed volume in Jawan Jennings if the offense was supposed to be good, aka had Brock Purdy playing. But now that you have no Purdy and expectations are dramatically lowered in San Francisco, I think I will go ahead and pivot over to Jamison Williams. Okay. We got Stevenson or Tracy. Honestly, Stevenson or Tracy, I very much do think is up to you. Both teams are dogs. Both teams probably aren't able to run the ball a ton in the second half. Neither running back has a massive role as a receiver either. So I wouldn't fault you whatsoever if you wanted to go through and if you wanted to take either guy, really. Stevenson's going to get a little more usage as a receiver. Stevenson's also in a slightly better offense, but Tracy's been more consistent since he's taken over as the starter. But both running backs are kind of touchdown or bust in bad offenses. So not super excited about either guy. And I do think that they're in a similar tier, and it is kind of up to you. Bertrand says, Charbonnet or Akers, rough week. It definitely sounds like a rough week, my guy. I probably go ahead. I take Akers. I think a lot of people are going to get trapped into Akers this week just because he had the receiving touchdown a week ago. Obviously, he had double-digit touches as well. And I do think that there's that outside chance that we look back and go, okay, maybe the only reason that you actually had that usage from Cam Akers was maybe it was Aaron Jones's injury lingering a little bit longer than people expected, and they wanted to just slow roll Aaron Jones back into the offense. And now that Aaron Jones has another week to get healthy, maybe Aaron Jones goes through and maybe Aaron Jones looks to be a little bit better here. That is a possibility. But it's also a possibility that, no, maybe Cam Akers is expanding his role. Maybe Cam Akers is going to have a larger piece of this Vikings offense going into the future than what he's had. Solomon says, Love or Kyler in a 6-point passing touchdown format. 6-point passing touchdown format, definitely going to be a lot closer because the rushing production's not going to be everything here. I still probably go ahead and take Kyler Murray. I don't love the fact that you have no Brock Purdy if you wanted to play Jordan Love this week. But ladies and gentlemen, I have a special surprise, a special guest for y'all in this live stream. Come on. Come on. Come here. Come here. Don't go under the desk right away. You got to tell people hi first. Say what's up, people. What's up? Sorry Mason was late to the stream. He had to walk me this morning. Right? Is it nice that you get to go on walks before the Sunday morning streams now? It's a little later in the year. Say, what's up, peeps? What's up, peeps? Do not come knocking at Mason's door because I will attack. I am a super scary guard dog. Okay. Let's move over. Now, Judge says, pick 2, Ridley Harrison or Hopkins. I'll probably go Harrison, Hopkins, hoping that we get a touchdown scored in a good offense. Now, obviously, Ridley should have more guaranteed target volume, however. But let me move this over and see if we have any more questions that came through on the site, and we'll answer those and then get back to the questions in the live chat. Again, all I ask is if you have not done so already, please go down there, hit that like button. I mean, we are live streaming every single day, but Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. And then also, of course, if you wanted to send in any questions, you could always ask a personal advice question on flockfantasy.com. Just hit the button in the top right corner, or you can just hit the link in the live chats that says ask a question here. There you can send in a super message, a start sit question, a trade question, or get a full-blown team review. Now, of course, if you wanted that team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for tonight's game. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day as well. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I'm able to go ahead and credit you with that free team review voucher. And if you're looking at my favorite underdog pick this week, that's going to be Mike Evans to go higher than 55.5 receiving yards, where he should have zero limitations, or at least that's what Ian Rappaport's telling us. But again, I want to remind y'all that I'm absolute garbage at underdog picks, so probably you do not want to listen to me. But let's go ahead and let's move this over, ladies and gentlemen. See if we have any more questions on the site. We do have a couple more questions coming in. Let me answer these, and we'll get back to the questions in the live chat. Bezecki coming out with our next question. Here, running back, we have no Bijan, so we're looking at Bigsby, Estime, or Roshan. Obviously, no Bigsby either. I'll still go with Audric Estime over Roshan Johnson, where I know that it looked like Javonte came out, and Javonte answered every question last week, and Javonte is the clear starting running back over Estime, and the coaching staff was just completely lying to us. And I do think that that's probably the majority true, but while I'd rank Javonte ahead of Estime, I don't necessarily know if it was all lies what we were talking about with the Estime usage last week, what the coaching staff told us. And then going over to the wide receivers, I think you absolutely have to play Josh Downs over these secondary options. I think we're going to go Laporta over Hunter Henry, who's been practicing in full through the entire week. And then I will go Debo Samuel over Jameson. Again, with Debo, have to have lowered expectations with no Brock Purdy. I don't mind taking the lower than 58.5 receiving yards or total yards on Underdog whatsoever. But in comparison to him versus Jameson Williams, I think both players are a little bit touchdown or bust, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we have more targets going the direction of Debo. Now, Rob14 coming out with our next question. Here we need to figure out a flex between Neighbors, Downs, Kittle. I think you have to play Malik Neighbors here. I mean, I can't tell you like, oh no, Malik Neighbors, the guy that's leading the NFL in targets per game. You have to bench him in a great matchup in favor of Josh Downs because Malik Neighbors is going to be in a bad passing offense. Josh Downs is also going to be in a very bad passing offense. George Kittle is also going to be in a very bad passing offense. So, I mean, obviously it's a really unfortunate spot where you have to bench Kittle and where you have to bench Downs. It's just your lineup's too damn good. So I think we go ahead. I think you play Malik Neighbors. Not the easiest call in the world because you have the veto, because you have the groin injury, but still. Now, Tordo at the door says, debating K-Dot or Will Dissly now that Evans is 100%. I would still personally go with K-Dot. I think that you need to go through and you need to drop one of these tight ends for sure, though. I think you need to drop two of them. I think you pick your two favorite and then let the other two go. Let me just make sure. Yeah, this is a redraft league. So we're rostering 4 tight ends right now. So I would play K-Dot out of this group. I'm emotionally attached to Sam Laporta. So I probably would hold on to Laporta and cut Dissly and cut Jonnu, but anybody that's smart would probably tell you to not do so. But I would definitely at least cut 2 tight ends. I'd play Kate Otten, and then I would choose whatever tight end on the bench that you're going to hold alongside Cade Otton. Because the thing with Otton is it's not like he only got the bump because you have the injury to Evans. You also have the injury to Godwin, which of course is giving Cade Otton the bump at the same time. Now, Esco coming out with our next question. So super message says, Zach Charbonnet or Jonathan Brooks, tough bye week. It is a tough spot. Obviously, we are expecting, let me say this. I would definitely rather have Jonathan Brooks rest of season over Charbonnet. As both I view as like premium handcuff backs where the starter would get out in front of them, then all of a sudden they turn into absolute must-start options. But I do think that Kenneth Walker's a more talented running back than Chuba Hubbard, and I think I'd be more surprised if Zach Charbonnet were to take over as the starter in Seattle than I would be if Jonathan Brooks were to somehow take over as a starter in Carolina. So for me, rest of season, I would rather have Brooks over Charbonnet. However, for this week here, I would probably prefer to go with Charbonnet over Jonathan Brooks. Because not only is Brooks going to be slow rolled his first NFL game ever, but at the same time, you just have the worst matchup you could possibly ask for going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, where you do just have an absolute massive spread here between Carolina and KC, where the Chiefs should be able to just kind of boat race them. So I would go Sharb over Brooks this week. I would go Brooks over Sharb rest of season. Now, Pico coming out with a massive start set question. Thank you so much, my guy. Let me hook you up with a free start set question just in case there's anything else you ever want to send in. Says, need help with the flex position. Start 2 between Neighbors, Tracy, or Bucky. Thanks. So thank you. Here, it will be a little bit of a tough spot. You definitely have a much better situation than most people. I think we're going to go with Malik Neighbors for sure, where, again, I understand the hesitation around the offense. But the thing with the transition to DeVito and how poorly the Giants project out this week, it's about the same total point projection that we have seen with the Giants all season. Like, sportsbooks aren't telling us that, I don't know. They're not telling us that the Giants will be much worse with Tommy DeVito than they were with Daniel Jones. I think you kind of expect similar production. Going over to the flex, if you told me Mason, Ladd McConkey's 100% good to go for Monday night, I would rather have Ladd McConkey over Tracy. However, if you were to say, no, Mason, that's not the case, Ladd is questionable, he may miss, then at that point, I think you can play it safe and go with Tyrone Tracy. Definitely play Neighbors. I would not play Bucky. It's either going to be Tracy or Ladd. And if you're worried about Ladd potentially missing, as your message may make it seem to be, I would go with Tracy. Now, obviously, am I super excited to do this? Hell to the no. I mean, it is a spot in which it's still going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. And now we're starting their starting receiver and starting running back. But moving over to the Mother Flock, always happy to see us. Is 5 and 6. Do I risk waiting for Ladd, Disley, and Ertz at tight end? I would go Disley at tight end. Ooh, wait, actually, you have Cade Otton. I'd go Disley over Ertz if need be, but we're going to go Cade Otton over both. Wide receiver, I think I'd play Ladd over those guys if he was good to go. Let me answer running back first. Running back, we would go DeAndre Swift and Amir Abdullah. Wide receiver, say you play Downs here, then you could plan on Ladd, and if Ladd doesn't play, you could pivot over to Flowers. So if you told me, Mason, Ladd's 100% good to go, I think you could maybe roll the dice and plan on playing both Ladd and Zay Flowers. But with Ladd not being at 100% and maybe wanting to have an option you could pivot to in that Monday night game, maybe playing Josh Downs and then leaving both Ladd McConkey as well as Zay Flowers as options later would be a nice little move to make. Because if Ladd were to be out, then obviously you can pivot over to Zay Flowers. But let me pivot over and let me answer some of the free questions that we have in the chat. So please, if you have any questions in the chat, go down there and drop them. I'd be happy to try to answer as many questions as I possibly can here. JLG says, why are people not discussing the fact if Vlad misses, Herbert is less viable? That's why it's important, because I have Vlad and Herbert, but I also have Kid Otten and Baker. So while I'm excited about Ladd McConkey, let's make sure we're on the same page. Ladd at this point is not to the same tier, is not to the same caliber player that like Chris Godwin was earlier in the season, or Mike Evans is. So say when you get the injury and all of a sudden I don't know, you get the injury to both Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, how he plummets Baker down the rankings. If Vlad were to miss, it definitely negatively impacts Herbert, but I don't think it's to the same degree as what you had with the Tampa guys and Baker Mayfield. Okay. Let's move this over. Brett says Ridley or Tracy in a full PPR formats. I'm going to go Tracy. I mean, if you're looking at both players, they're both stuck in garbage offenses. They both have guaranteed volume. Obviously, in the case of Tracy, it's with carries and targets. In the case of Ridley, it's just with the target volume that you'd expect here in Tennessee. But for me, I'm always going to go with the guy that gives you the guaranteed touches at running back in comparison to wide receiver. If the offenses project out similarly. And obviously, it's not a wide receiver caliber player like CeeDee Lamb, or just simply Ridley's not to that point. Now let's move this over. CXL says Pittman or Quentin Johnston this week. I will go with Quentin Johnston. They are pretty damn close, though. I will say with Johnston, while I'm 100% rooting for him to continue to crush how he has been, I mean, we have been absolutely printing with our underdog draft team so far this season. Primarily because of, I don't know, a couple different players. But Quentin Johnston's helped us out a ton. Realistically speaking, he has been kind of living off of unsustainable touchdown rates, which I think you probably should expect to come back down to earth just a bit here. Daniel says Dell, Waddle, or Rome in a full PPR format. For me, I'm going to go Dell. I'll be honest with y'all, though. I am stuck playing Waddle this week. Like, let me go ahead. I'll show y'all what I'm stuck doing. Primarily, or maybe only because you freaking have no Devonta Smith this week. Looking at this, I have no Smith. I have no Chase. I have no Kincaid. Pearsall's not viable because Purdy's out. I have no Purdy. So I had to go to the waiver wire. I had to pick up Stafford to stream. And also I'm having to throw Waddle in here as well, out wide receiver. So it is a tough world to be in, but we're going to try our best. Trying our best. And the thing with Rome is Rome's going to be in a worse offense than what you have with Dell. And while Rome's 100% trending in the right direction, you still have a considerable amount of target competition with the combo of Debo. I'm sorry. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. I apologize. Okay. Now, Nathan says Kareem Hunt or David Montgomery in a full PPR format. I mean, I have these guys ranked back-to-back this week. I think both are absolutely set up to crush. Like, going through and looking at this, obviously, if Pacheco was going to be good to go, it would be a very, very different story. But let's sort by my rankings. Running back, I'm currently looking at Montgomery at RB11 in my rankings this week, and Kareem Hunt, RB12. So, I don't think you can make a wrong decision. I think both guys are going to be phenomenal, but I will warn that while it was nice to see the receiving usage for Kareem Hunt this past week, it was a 1 week thing where if you look at the larger sample this season, you've had absolutely nothing as a receiver. So it would be a really tough spot to expect that we get the true 3-down usage and we get the receiving role for Hunt again this week. Trustlock, I promise you, we didn't skip your super message. You can go to the email, and if you go through that link, it will take you to the second that we got to it. Sean says Debo or Bucky in a full PPR format. If you had Purdy, I would very easily go ahead and take Debo Samuel. With no Purdy, it's much, much tougher. I have no idea. I would go Debo, to be honest. If it was my team, I would go with Debo Samuel. I'm hoping that Bucky Irving expands the role. It's a very good matchup. But White still has a massive role as a receiver, and White obviously has taken a lot of the touchdowns. But coming out of the bye week, that may change. So we typically see the post-rookie bye week bump. Now, let's go ahead and move this. Steven says, do you see A.D. Mitchell having any true value considering the Colts-Lions total is over 50? Well, the over-under in the Lions-Colts game being over 50 may not help the Colts players a ton because you do have a spread on this game of about 8.5 points. Like, the reason that this game's over under 50 points is not because anything to do with the passing volume that we should expect in Indianapolis. It's to do with the fact that pretty much every week, including this week, the Lions offense projects to score the most points in the NFL. So I don't think Adonai Mitchell has really any value or any role whatsoever. I mean, if you are looking at the usage with A.D. Mitchell, it took a nosedive. It plummeted. And I mean, it plummeted the second you had Pittman back into this offense. Levita says early game inactive alerts just came in. Yeah, I was looking at them. I don't really see anything that's surprising. We can go through it together. Keenan Allen's good to go. Malik Neighbors good to go. Like, are there any surprise inactives? I don't think so. Frozen Grape says Herbert is really QB4 this week. The average expert ranking on flogfantasy.com does have him as QB4. If you go over and look at my rank, I have Herbert QB9. I think really, yeah, the tier of the top three guys, Kyler Murray to his own tier, and then a tier of 5 through about 10, or 5 through 9, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, the average expert ranking on flogfantasy.com does have Justin Herbert as QB4. Two Things says, will JSN outperform Metcalf again in fantasy points? I would be very surprised. I don't want to say I want to be very surprised to see it. Anything can happen any given week. I mean, rest of season, I would still personally very easily prefer DK Metcalf, where you've seen the extremely large sample with Metcalf that you haven't necessarily had with JSN. Like going through and looking at the projections just on Underdog this week even. I mean, you can see that while, yes, JSN has more receiving yards, receptions, targets, all last week, JSN's higher lower 57.5 receiving yards. DK Metcalf's higher lower 67.5 receiving yards. So expectations are still for sure that DK Metcalf is wide receiver 1 in this offense for the rest of the season. Now, of course, JSN's trending in the right direction, though, so maybe things do change here. Let's move this over. Joe says Keenan Allen or Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell, neither are interesting now that you have Pittman back in. Like, I'm going to go Keenan Allen. There's no way I'm going to go with any of the secondary receivers in Indianapolis. In Indy, you can start Downs. In Indy, you can maybe throw a Hail Mary with Pittman. But I'm not excited to play either guy. Now, real quick, if you have not done so already, please go down there, hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like less than 10% of y'all have. I mean, we live stream every single day. I have not missed a day in like 150 plus days of streaming. But Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you're ever going to hit that like button, please do it now. And also, of course, if you wanted to get any guaranteed answers to your questions, you can find the link to flockfantasy.com in the live chat where it says ask a question here. Or you can just go over to flockfantasy.com, and if you hit that button in the top right corner that says personal advice, you can send in a super message, a start sit question, a trade question, or a full-blown team review, whatever you're wanting. Again, if you were wanting a team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the offer that we have on Underdog Fantasy, however, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick for tonight's game, more than less than half a total yard. And on top of that, you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I'm able to go ahead and credit you with that free team review voucher. But let me move this over and let's get to some of the additional questions that we have on the site. I think maybe we had a few more coming in that we need to answer. And then obviously we'll go back to the questions in the live chat. We only have 3. First one coming out from Hellboy Jordan. Appreciate you, my guy. Excited to check this out. Says, hey, Mason, picked up Disley for Cade Otton's bye and Kincaid injuries last week. Do we drop Disley or Kincaid? Rest of season, I personally would prefer Dalton Kincaid over Will Disley. Especially if you have Cade Otton, who you're presumably going to be starting here anyway. And you are just kind of chasing the highest ceiling you possibly can get. Just realistically going through this, get Hurst back in, get Ladd McConkey continue to expand his role. I could very easily see the target share coming down for what you have with Disley in Los Angeles here. I think Kincaid's in the better offense between the two. I think Kincaid's the better player between the two. So for me, I drop Disley. You play Cade Otton this week because Otton could be a viable play weeks into the future here as well. And Trustlock, I'd rather have Reed depending on the injury with Purdy. Damien coming out with our next question says, 6-5, what are your thoughts Quentin Johnston would be the second flex and Waddle for depth. Here, Christian Watson to Quentin Johnston, about the same in my mind. I'd probably maybe prefer Quentin Johnston just slightly. Maybe we need to go through and move Johnston up in our rest of season ranks. But again, I am set up to win a ridiculous amount of money if Quentin Johnston continues to do what he has been. But the issue is you just can't look at fantasy points scored over the past month and assume that is guaranteed to be the case going into the future. I mean, honestly, we need to move Ricky Pearsall down a little bit lower as well. The thing with Johnston is you are very much looking at an unsustainable touchdown rate where it would be very difficult to assume that he continues to score a touchdown on every 7 or so targets. So for me, as we look at this, like, I think Quentin Johnston maybe is a slight upgrade over Christian Watson. But like, Jalen Waddle doesn't look startable. At least out of all these guys, Calvin Ridley does see the consistent target volume. So I would probably rather just keep Calvin Ridley here. Like, I think you can say that Calvin Ridley will see the majority of the targets out of this grouping of guys. Now, Cam 1031, quarterback, we're looking at Geno Stafford Darnold. Stafford has a really tough matchup. I had to pick him up myself because I am personally dealing with a Brock Purdy injury. I think I would actually go Geno Smith, where even if Stafford's been better with the addition of Puka and cut back into this offense, again, the matchup this week is going to be a brutal one. And if we're looking at Neighbors Tracy, Neighbors leading the NFL in targets per game at the moment. The bad offense is going to affect both of them. It's a phenomenal matchup for the receiver here. I think I probably go ahead and just take Malik Neighbors. Also, I think Malik Neighbors is the much better player. But it is something that you have to maybe think about given the groin injury that you have with Neighbors. Let me go ahead and refresh this here. I think we have a couple more questions coming in. Now, BZ Young coming out with our next question says, Downs or Reed at the flex both have bad game scripts with all the 49er injuries. So I agree with you. Yeah, I think that you actually are less excited about the receivers in Green Bay, given the fact that you probably see a lower scoring game environment in general with no Brock Purdy. And the Packers can probably run the ball in the second half. If you're looking at Josh Downs, it's a game environment in which I'd be very surprised if you actually have the ability to run the ball in the second half for the Indianapolis Colts. One, it's a brutal matchup for running backs going up against the Lions. And two, obviously the Lions are 8-point favorites in this contest. So if you look at Downs Reed, they're literally back-to-back in our wide receiver rankings this week. I think you can probably use the tiebreaker as the argument that with the Brock Purdy injury, if these guys were back-to-back in our rankings, with no Purdy now, possibly limiting the amount of passing attempts and passing volume that you have in Green Bay, maybe a pivot over and look at Josh Downs as the more exciting player, the more consistent play here at receiver. Now, Robbie coming out with a start-sit question. Says, what are your thoughts, Mason? I need a big win. Here, running back between Dowdle and Eckler, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Rico Dowdle. If you're looking at what we've had from Eckler so far this season, while he's crushed over the past month, and honestly, it's helped my underdog teams a bunch, or realistically speaking, 3 of those games, you had no Brian Robinson. In this past week, where Eckler gets the 11 targets and he leads the team in receiving in Washington, it's very much an outlier if you compare it to what we've had all season. Whereas if you look at the other games that you had with a healthy Brian Robinson, Eckler's not seeing double-digit targets. He's nowhere even close. Eckler's a running back that's seeing about 6 carries and about 3 to 4 targets out of the backfield. Now, obviously, Eckler's in a much, much better offense than what you're going to have with Rico Dowdle. Whereas if you're looking at Eckler, in this game, the Commanders are favored by about 10 points. They should score significantly more than Dallas. So I think with Brian Robinson presumably being at 100%, and with this being a spot where you probably don't have a ton of Jaden Daniels dropbacks, where Eckler has to compete at the goal line with Brian Robinson, he has to compete at the goal line with Jaden Daniels. I would expect the target volume to fall tremendously in comparison to what we had this past week. I think I actually go ahead and I take Rico Dowdle over Eckler. But obviously, it's not like a super easy call just because Dowdle isn't a significantly worse offense than what you have with Eckler. But let's move this over and answer some of the questions that we have in the live chat. So please, if you have any questions in the chat, drop them. I'd be happy to try to get to as many as I can. And Javier says, start Tyreek or Mike Evans. Just like what we said last week, the Dolphins project to be a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL. This week, they actually project to be the 3rd highest scoring offense in the league. So Tyreek Hill, absolute must-start option. For the love of God, do not play Mike Evans over him. I mean, if we knew that Evans truly is 100%, which is what they're saying, and you had no Godwin, then maybe you can make an argument for Evans. But the thing is, like we saw them tell us that Nico Collins was 100% this past week, whereas Nico Collins comes through and he plays less than 50% of the snaps here. I think I go ahead and I think I take Tyreek. Okay. Now, TBG says Bucky Irving or Rachaad White. I would still prefer Rachaad White, both this week as well as rest of season. Obviously, base expectation is the rookie continues to expand his role coming out of the bye week. That's what you see most weeks here. Now, I think rest of season, if you really wanted to make an argument that you like the efficiency that you've had with a Bucky in comparison to the inefficiency that we've seen with Rachaad White, maybe rest of season you can make an argument for Bucky, but I'm not putting Bucky in the lineup over White until we actually see the usage flip between the two. Where the touches have been comparable, but Rachaad White's been the guy in the red zone, and Rachaad White at the same time has had the receiving usage, which is the big thing. Mr. Swish says Tommy DeVito or Drake May. It's Drake May, and it's not even remotely close. Drake May has more rushing upside, and at the same time, the Patriots project to score more points. Okay. Now, next question coming out from Andrew says Harrison, Tank Dell, or Quentin Johnston. I would love for Quentin Johnston to be the answer here, but the reality is it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. Harrison's been up and down as of late. You've seen a bunch of weird games played for the Cardinals. But again, base expectation, and you're kind of seeing it across the NFL. We've seen it with Xavier Worthy. We've seen it with Roma Dunze. And pretty much everybody but Malik Neighbors is the rookie wide receivers will see more opportunities and more targets coming out of their bye week. I think Harrison should be better to end the season than what he was through the first half of the year. Hopefully more consistent. And if you're looking at what you have with Harrison, this also should be a better environment if you were wanting dropbacks and pass attempts for Kyler Murray as opposed to what we've had over the past few weeks. We're obviously over the past few weeks, the Cardinals have just been absolutely blowing out their opponents, and we really haven't had to see a ton of Kyler dropbacks or pass attempts. Now, Sleepy coming through with our next question says, Jordan Love or Anthony Richardson in a full PPR 4-point passing touchdown league? So definitely it's a spot where you do have Anthony Richardson in a situation where you're going to have a considerable amount of dropbacks. Not only are you going to have a ton of dropbacks, but I mean, we know that teams can't really run the ball against the Lions. I still go with Jordan Love. However, where I think with Love, just based on what we've seen all season, you have a higher floor than what you're looking at with Anthony Richardson. Even if the matchups would say that Richardson maybe is a higher ceiling. A Sidekick coming out says, Flock, you're great. Much love, my guy. Need help starting Daniels or Baker Mayfield. Lost the last 2 games with Daniels starting. For sure, please, if you have Jaden Daniels, you have to play Jaden Daniels this week. Right now, sportsbooks are projecting the Commanders to be the 2nd highest scoring offense in the NFL this week, only behind the Detroit Lions. And if you're looking at what you have with Jaden Daniels, this is a quarterback that gives you the rushing upside of the larger sample. The past 2 weeks, he hasn't ran the ball as much. And also, of course, if you're looking at Daniels, this is a quarterback that had really tough matchups over the past 2 weeks. So, please, anybody who's watching this, if you have Jaden Daniels and you're spooked off what you've seen previously in weeks 11 and 10, and you were thinking about benching Jaden Daniels for another option, I'm going to tell you right now, it is a very bad idea. The only quarterback I would start over Jaden Daniels this week would be Lamar Jackson and possibly Jalen Hurts. Jaden Daniels is not just the top 5 quarterback this week. Jaden Daniels is the top 3 quarterback this week. Reffel says TJ Hawkinson or Cade Otton. I'm going to go with Otton. Obviously, a lot more excited about Cade Otton when you have both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans injured. And while Evans is coming back in, you can expect that to maybe eat into the red zone role and the touchdown upside that you have with Cade Otton. You still have no Godwin, so I think you still have a considerable amount of target volume. And then let's go. Diego says full BBR, Bucky Irving or Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, Bucky Irving in a much better matchup. And Taylor's going to have to deal with Anthony Richardson potentially vulturing rushing touchdowns. Anthony Richardson having a lower checkdown rate overall. So I understand where you're coming from here, but you still very easily need to play Jonathan Taylor over Bucky Irving, where Bucky Irving's arguably the running back 2 in his backfield, whereas Jonathan Taylor, yes, in a tough matchup, but he is going to see every single snap, every single touch. He does not let another player in his offense touch the ball here, at least at the running back position. That is. Now let's move this over. And real quick, it looks like way less than 10% of y'all have hit that like button. So please, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this live stream, ladies and gentlemen. Helps us out a ton. We live stream every single day. We have not missed a single day of live streaming in I want to say 150 days in a row, but Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you're ever going to hit that like button, I would kindly ask that you do it now. And also, let's go over and let's see if we have any more questions on the site. We can get to all the guaranteed questions that we have on the site, then get right back to the free questions in the live chat, trying to answer as many questions as we possibly can. But obviously, if you ever wanted to get a guaranteed answer to any of your questions, you can hit the link in the chat that says ask a question here. Or you can go over and you can hit the button in the top right corner of flockfantasy.com that says personal advice. And you can send in a super message, start set question, trade question, or get a full-blown team review, whatever you're wanting. Now, of course, I would recommend if you wanted that team review to take advantage of the offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy, just because it's going to be much cheaper. Where if you go over to Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half total yard for the game tonight. And on top of that, you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day. And if you were looking for a pick on Underdog, my favorite pick would be Mike Evans to go higher than 55.5 receiving yards. But again, I'm 0 for 1,000 on our Underdog call, so probably don't want to be listening to me here. But Anyway, let's go ahead and let's fire up this next one. Coming out from Tyler. Says Cup or Tyreek. Also, we have Jones on the bench. This is a phenomenal team. I think Cup versus Tyreek, I'm going to go ahead and I would probably take Tyreek Hill, to be honest. Really tough matchup for Cup. Really bad game environment going up against Philly. Tyreek, you currently project to be in the third highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. But I would play both of them over Mike Evans, where the reality is I would probably take Evans out of the starting lineup. Because when you have the wide receiver one options such as Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp, there's no real reason to roll the dice with the receiver coming off the injury. Whereas I would tell 99.99% of people, you're starting Mike Evans this week because 99% of people don't have a wide receiver one that they can lock and load instead there. Now, Elijah coming out with a team review. Excited to check this out, my guy. Thank you so much. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start set question as well, just in case there's anything else that maybe we don't cover here that you would want us to talk about. But you're saying we have two 2025 first and in second to last place currently. So if you're in second to last place currently, you are 100% incentivized to pivot over to a hard rebuild here. Team name is Love Thy Neighbors. We are currently in the middle of the league analyzer in terms of value, but we are 4-7. So 100%, I want to be pivoting over to a rebuilding roster. And in general, if anybody watching this doesn't play Dynasty or understand the approach of a rebuilding team in Dynasty, what you're looking to do is not try to figure out what players are going to be putting up fantasy points in 2025. You're not going to be trying to figure out what players are going to be putting up fantasy points in 2026. What is so much easier is just going through and bucketing off players as assets that will gain in value going into the offseason versus assets that will lose value. It's going to be very difficult. If you ask me, Mason, how many points does James Cook score in 2025? I have no idea before the Bills make free agent moves, before the Bills have their NFL draft. I think there is a wide range of outcomes there. But if you go, well, Mason, is James Cook worth more or less this offseason than he is today? I go, he's probably going to be worth less. There'll be inherent uncertainty about the role. People won't need the points inside their starting lineup. And you can kind of do that throughout this entire team. So like Drake May, will he be worth more or less this offseason than he is now? A Drake May will be worth more this offseason. People will go through, people will project the second year bump. They'll see the career trajectory, extremely young, an asset that we can build around for a very long time. So obviously we're absolutely just chilling here with Drake May. Nothing to discuss there. Now, if we're looking at the quarterbacks below here with Darnold, Fields, Cousins, obviously, if we could, I would love to go ahead and I'd love to maybe pivot off of Kirk Cousins, a quarterback that should presumably have really no value this offseason. But with that being said, it is just much, much easier said than done, knowing that any team that's a true contender won't exactly need Kirk Cousins. And if Kirk Cousins is some big-time quarterback upgrade for them, then that team's probably not a real contender in the first place. Now, going over to what we have at running back. Again, running back's typically only a position that we need to worry about on a contending team. On a rebuilding team, it's very difficult to project out running backs years into the future. Like James Cook, again, very easily could be the starting running back for Buffalo, and he could run back exactly what he did this year, next season for the Bills. But also, there's an outside chance that maybe, I don't know, you have this team draft a running back in round 3 of the NFL draft, turn it into a running back by committee. There's a chance that they bring in a free agent, even though the free agents are pretty thin, but there is an outside chance that you do see an additional running back going over to Buffalo. So if we could get out of James Cook and pivot over to a running back that we'd be very confident that he is going to hold on to value and possibly increase in value, while at the same time we can pick up an additional asset. Like going through and trading away James Cook and say getting a player like Jonathan Brooks and a future pick. Like if you could trade away James Cook and a depth option like Mike Evans and get Jonathan Brooks and a future first, I think that'd make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, with ETN, the issue is no contending team really needs him, so we're looking to holds. Going over to what we have at wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas very easily can be worth more this offseason than they are right this second, so we're looking to holds. Kind of say the same thing with Dontavian Wicks and Adonai Mitchell. Really, the only players that I think you would need to sell with this team pivoting over to a rebuild is you absolutely need to sell Mike Evans and you need to sell George Kittle. Based off both of them pushing 30 or already in their 30s, we can be very, very confident that these players are going to be worth less this offseason than they are today. The player that I would throw on the trade block and see what we could get, and if you got a great return, I would love to move off of him, would be James Cook. And going through and looking at maybe some of the teams that are contenders right now and teams that could actually use some of this additional value. Like an easy move would be to go through and approach this team that's currently 8-3 and see if there's a world where we can send them Mike Evans, get back Chris Godwin, and a second round pick. Because if you can send them Mike Evans, get back Godwin and a second round pick, Mike Evans drafted in 2014, Chris Godwin drafted in 2017, you do get the 3-year age tier down. You get the younger asset that could potentially be worth more this offseason. And if you could pick up an additional rookie pick at the same time, I think that'd make a lot of sense. While maybe this team that's here 8-3 that really needs to contend, they could view Mike Evans as a difference-making player for them. Now, obviously, they're not going to have much interest in George Kittle. They're sitting with Travis Kelce at the moment. Going through and looking at this team that's currently 8-3, I mean, this team is loaded up at running back, wide receiver. They're loaded up as well. Maybe they could use some help at tight ends. I mean, I would be pretty confident in saying that Laporta this offseason probably has more value than George Kittle, just given the age. So if you wanted to pivot over from Kittle to Laporta with this contending team, I think that would be interesting. I would obviously try to squeeze out a little more value. I would offer them Kittle for Laporta in a second. Worst thing they can do is say no. Then you go, okay, well, I'll give you Kittle for Laporta straight up and see what they respond to that. But I think that could be a deal that obviously helps put them over the edge and help them win this year, while at the same time gives us a little bit more value in the long term. Going over to another team that's maybe looking to contend right now, there are a bunch of 5-6 teams. This team's currently 6-5. They really don't have that other running back. They have Eckler as their RB2. So maybe sending them James Cook and getting back an additional asset to Rashee Rice. Like sending them James Cook, getting back Rashee Rice, who will be worth more this offseason than he is today, while at the same time picking up an additional rookie pick. I think that could help both teams a lot. Where if we're able to go through, we're able to get Rice for that long-term value. You give them James Cook to really help them put them over the edge this season. That's what I'd be looking to do. Those would be the players that I'd be looking to sell. Obviously, I did hook you up with that free trade question and that free start sit question as well. So just in case there's anything else that you wanted to send my way, I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you, my friend. But yeah, I think outside of that, the rest of the players on this team, you probably want to be chilling with. Obviously, I mean, if you can go sell Travis Etienne for like a second and a third, you would. But it's just much easier said than done to go through and sell those depth veterans that aren't really going to be moving the needle for contenders. Because in reality, when you go out there and look at the contending teams, like they really just couldn't use somebody like Travis Etienne. Let me go ahead and refresh this. Next question coming out from Austin says, very strange format in my league. Thanks. Thank you. Here, I don't know exactly what the format is, but I would definitely play Kareem Hunt over JSN and J.K. Dobbins. Hunt is just in a perfect spot with a massive spread. You're in about the best offense you could ask for. You're in about the best matchup you could ask for. The only drawback with Kareem Hunt is the receiving usage hasn't been super consistent. Obviously, we had the receiving usage this past week, But beyond that, really, it hasn't been there. So I would go with Kareem, but it's not the easiest. Actually, it is very easy. Because I hate benching Dobbins without high scoring that game environment should be. I hate benching JSN with how strong he has been, but still. Now, Filthy Flocker, happy to see you, my guy. Thank you for coming out. Starts at question where we're looking at getting an additional flex in, where right now we have Ramondre, Dowdle, Harrison, maybe Montgomery. No, we don't. We have Montgomery in the lineup. I think you probably go ahead and you play either Ramondre Stevenson or Marvin Harrison Jr. Full PBR format, I would personally play Harrison. Where if you are looking at Marvin Harrison, this is a receiver that you'd expect to expand his target share coming out of the bye week. It's a decent game environment going up against Seattle here, where a spread on this game is only 1 point. You can see it being very competitive, where you actually do have to have a considerable amount of pass attempts for Kyler Murray. And if you get the dropbacks, if you get the pass attempts for Kyler, I think you can be in a great spot. Now, Ryan Neal coming out with our next question says, Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels? It's Jaden Daniels, and it's not close. We looked at this earlier, but again, if you're looking at sports books, they're telling us that the Commanders are supposed to be the second highest scoring offense in the NFL. If you're looking at Underdog Fantasy projections, you are actually seeing that they have Jaden Daniels higher, lower currently, about 21 fantasy points, whereas they have Bo Nix higher, lower currently, about 17.5 fantasy points. So you 100% need to go through and you need to take Daniels. If anybody here is watching this, I understand that Jaden Daniels has been disappointing as of late over the past 2 weeks. But with that being said, it's been a 2-game stretch where you've had really tough matchups. Not only has it been a 2-game stretch with really tough matchups, but you've seen the rushing production dip. I don't expect that to be the case forever. Please go Daniels. And then down here in the flex, also, please go DeAndre Swift over Quentin Johnston. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Johnston crushes it. But again, if you are looking at Quentin Johnston, while it is a great matchup, at the same time, you are looking at a receiver that's living off an unsustainable touchdown rate. So, I don't know if you can go through and I don't know if you can take the receiver seeing like 6-ish targets a game. I mean, even less than that over the running back that's getting 20 opportunities a game, even if the receiver's in a much better offense. But let me go ahead and let's move this around. Let's get this going. Javier says rain expected in the Cardinals game. 99% of the time, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but a very, very high percentage of the time, people overreacting to weather makes them make pretty bad decisions with their starting lineup. Like going through, and here again, of course, sportsbooks, they have every little data point you could ever need. Sportsbooks know what the weather is going to be in this Cardinals game in Seattle. You go through and you look at the games that they project to be the highest scoring games in the NFL this week. You have the Colts, Lions, Chargers, Ravens with an over-under of 50.5 points. So these two games should be the highest scoring games in the league. Then you have the you have the Rams, Eagles at 48.5. And you have the Seahawks, Cardinals at 47.5. So this projects to be what? The 4th highest scoring game in the NFL this week. I think sportsbooks have access to the weather report, I'm not worried. Obviously, if it's a blizzard like what we had on Thursday nights, then to that extreme, you do probably need to be concerned. But most spots, no. Solomon says, what's Kyler's projection on Underdog? We can look at both Kyler and Geno here. Again, I'm playing Kyler pretty much no matter what, given the rushing upside that you have. Kyler's currently higher, lower, 18.5 fantasy points, 18.35. So he does project higher than somebody like Bo Nix this week. And if you're looking at Geno is currently higher, lower, about 18.75. Really high projection for Geno. Dear God. That's a little bit surprising. Odyssey says ladder downs. Obviously, it's a spot in which if you knew that Ladd McConkey was 100% going to go for Monday night, it'd very easily be Ladd. But it's just difficult without knowing the availability. If you had a pivot option that you could have on Monday night, maybe playing on Ladd. I'm assuming that Ladd probably plays. It's just not a guarantee. RJ says Brooks or Amir Abdullah in a 12-teamer. For me, I would pretty easily prefer Abdullah over Brooks for this week. Obviously, long-term can be a different story. Like, long-term, I'd rather have Jonathan Brooks. I think he's a much better player. Amir Abdullah could be the RB3 with his own depth chart. But when you have all the injuries in Las Vegas, even with the tough matchup, at least you're going to get the guaranteed opportunities for Abdullah that you're maybe not going to get with Brooks. Caesar says, if Vlad doesn't play, I have the perfect pivot in Deontay Johnson. It is surprising to see how bad Deontay Johnson has been. I mean, I don't even say bad, how limited he has been used. I mean, we go through in like the first week in Baltimore, you go, okay, it's understandable he doesn't get used. The second week, it's the Thursday night game. So it's like, oh, okay, it's understandable that he doesn't get used. I mean, he's had a total of 8 games with the Ravens. 8 days with the Ravens or whatever it is. But then the third game against Pittsburgh, where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe interesting to pick this dude up. I'm assuming that he's probably going to see 50+% of the snaps now. He still doesn't get used at all. It's like, why are you acquiring Deontay Johnson if you're just simply not going to use him? Okay. Cedarloo says, Abdullah or Myers in the flex in a half PPR format. I would rather have Jacoby Myers over Abdullah. Like, I definitely want to be on record. I'm not excited to play Amir Abdullah. Like, do not come back to me on Sunday night screaming that I was the guy who told you to play Amir Abdullah. The scenarios in which we play Amir Abdullah is if you're in a spot where the other options you are looking at are effectively just premium handcuff backs where the starters in front of them are healthy. So if you're looking at like Jonathan Brooks, where Chuba Hubbard's healthy. If you're looking at Roschon Johnson, where DeAndre Swift's going to be good to go. In that scenario, yeah, you go ahead and you play Amir Abdullah ahead of him. But if it's like a player that you would have considered in fantasy regardless, or Abdullah's not the caliber of an option in a horrible offense in a bad matchup that you need to go through and that you need to pivot. From the guy you'd usually be going with. Okay. Jordan says, I just sent a start set question due to more of those before the games. 100%. I mean, obviously, any questions sent on the site, we will give a guaranteed answer to. I'll go ahead and I'll answer yours right now, my guy. Obviously, if y'all ever wanted to send in any questions to get a guaranteed answer, you can always go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the personal advice button in the top right corner, or you can just hit the ask a question link in the live chats. You can send in a super message, starts a question, trade question, team review, whatever you're wanting. Again, if you wanted that team review, I would highly recommend taking advantage of the free offer that we have with Underdog Fantasy. Or, I mean, it's $10. You need a $10 deposit, but definitely a lot cheaper than going any other way, where you can go over to Underdog Fantasy, and if you use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you'll be getting a free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. And you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single day. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy, and obviously use code FLOCK. Some of my favorite picks on Underdog this week, but again, I do want to reiterate, I get absolutely crushed on Underdog picks every time I promote them. Mike Evans and David Montgomery. Mike Evans go higher than 55.5 receiving yards. Montgomery to go higher than 70 total yards, or 69 total yards, in a game environment in which the Lions are favored by about 8 points, and they should be able to run the ball in a good matchup. But let's go over and let's get to some of these questions that were asked. We should at least have one loading up here. We'll see. Yep, this one's coming from Jordan. So I guess we're going to go right back to the questions in the live chat after this. Says, is it crazy to consider Connor over Cooper Kupp? So if you're looking at Kupp, obviously Kupp does have a pretty tough matchup here going up against the Eagles. Now, if you're looking at the Eagles being able to go through and shut down opposing wide receiver ones, it's a difficult matchup where you can't just put your top corner on like Terry McLaurin last week, right, and just absolutely shut him down. Where if you're looking at what you have specifically with, say, I don't know, the Los Angeles Rams, you have the combination of Cooper Kupp as well as Puka Nacua. So I do think that you're a little bit less worried and a little bit less scared off of the matchup here, because I don't think Kupp gets shadowed by any means. If you look at my flex rankings this week, I have Cooper Kupp and James Conner legitimately back-to-back at 15 and 16. So again, I have them in a range where you can kind of consider whatever you want. Going through and looking at the Underdog projections, you have Cooper Kupp higher, lower, 64.5 total yards. Cooper Kupp higher, lower, 12.5 fantasy points. Whereas if you're going to look at what you have with James Conner, you have James Conner higher, lower, 90.5 total yards. James Conner higher, lower, 13.5 fantasy points. But keep in mind the fantasy points with Underdogs half PPR, whereas I'm sure you're playing in a full PPR format, where a full PPR league, Kupp could be a little more interesting. Yeah, this is a full PPR format. So I have them back-to-back in my rankings. Underdog projects Conner to be a slightly better option, but that's half PPR. If it was full PPR, it'd be about the same. Again, the matchup's tough for Kupp, but I don't think it's the end of the world given the fact you have Puka there as well. But can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Kupp or Conner in your starting lineup this week? Are you going to go Cooper Kupp or James Conner in your starting lineup? Okay. We got Conner, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner, 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 Kupp, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner, Kupp, Conner. So it does look like maybe a few more people are on Conner than Kupp. In reality, I think it's very close. I think you have a phenomenal team. I don't necessarily think you can go wrong. I think the correct answer is if your trade deadline's not passed, you send one of them in a 2-for-1 deal with Bo Nix to go get a true elite level quarterback like Lamar. But let's go ahead and let's submit that. Let's refresh. Do we have any additional questions coming in, or are we going to go back to the live chat here? We have 2 more coming in, then we'll go back to the live chat. This one coming out from Treyway. I don't know exactly what we need here. If you're asking who we start between these 3 receivers, if you looked at my flex rankings this week, I have Malik Neighbors wide receiver 20, Mike Evans wide receiver 21. I'm sorry, not wide receiver 20. I have him as the 20th best flex option. I have Evans as the 21st best flex option. And I have Metcalf as the 22nd best flex option. So I personally have these guys ranked back to back to back, where honestly, if you ask me this question 1,000 times, I may give you 1,000 different, I'll give you 333 different answers. For me, I think you probably go Neighbors, Evans, Metcalf. If you were a heavy favorite, though, I think you can move Metcalf to the top of the tier between the 3 of them. Because obviously, with both Evans and Neighbors, you are dealing with the injuries. Where with Neighbors, you have the groin. With Evans, you're coming off the hamstring. So you can play it safe, and you can just go with DK Metcalf, who we know is healthy here. But again, it's not a spot where any of these receivers are significantly higher or lower than any of the others. Now, Trevor coming out with a question. Always happy to see it, my guy. And update this profile pic. Come on, we got to get you with the fancy one here. But wide receiver, we have no Adams. We have no Mooney. We're looking at Reed, JSN, Evans. We have no Higgins as well. I'm definitely going to go Mike Evans. They're telling us that it will have 0 limitations, but obviously they told us the same thing with Nico. Nico played fewer than 50% of snaps last week. And then over for the flex, I will go ahead and take Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think you lower expectations with Reed with no Purdy, given the larger spread in this game. I think you actually can see it to be a little bit more rush heavy in Green Bay as opposed to what you would have had if Purdy had been good to go when the spread was only 2.5 points. And then obviously JSN leads the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards, fantasy points last week. I don't necessarily know if that is going to be a guarantee. But to carry into the future. But I do like the game environment. I know some people are worried about the rain, but I'm chilling. Now, Filthy Flocker coming out with a massive dono. Says, feels like I'm competing, but need to start rebuilding soon. I'm missing that 3rd quarterback in Superflex, and running backs are aging. Tried trading Mixon, Kamara, Andrews all offseason, and couldn't get 2nd rounders for them. Hilarious now. Trades are tough to come by in this league. Well, let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start set question. I would say now if you try trading Kamara and Mixon, should be very, very easy to get that 2nd rounder. But we are the Filthy Animals. We are currently 7th in the league analyzer. We are 7-4. So definitely a spot in which you are incentivized to go through and try to contend this season. Now, I understand maybe with this being a Superflex 12-team start 9 format, I'm wanting to have that 3rd quarterback, but the reality is both Jordan Love and Justin Herbert look startable weekly anyway. And if you are looking at what we have with their buys, you're already through the bye week for Jordan Love, and you're already through the bye week for Justin Herbert. So on a contending team at this point, I don't necessarily know if what I'm concerned about would be grabbing a 3rd quarterback. I think more so what I'd be looking at is trying to bolster up the starting lineup. And obviously, if we're looking at Love and Herbert here, both quarterbacks are in a tier where not only can we contend with them right now, but at the same time, you can build around them for the long term. Now, this is a league in which we should be able to start 4 running backs, I believe. We have Barkley, Kamara, Jacobs, Mixon. So if this is a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, 1 super flex league, you are in a phenomenal spot where I think it's going to be extremely difficult for anybody to compete with us going into the future, where we are presumably starting 4 running back ones. Now, obviously, if we are looking at what the expectations should be for guys like Barkley, Kamara, Jacobs, Mixon, all 4 of these running backs will be worth less this offseason than they are today. These are declining assets when it comes to their dynasty value, but frankly, it doesn't matter when you're sitting here with this strong of a contending team. We are 100% looking to win right now, this second anyway. So I absolutely love building around these running backs. Going over to wide receiver, we have A.J. Brown, Romeo. A.J. Brown, locked and loaded wide receiver 1. Rome, definitely a super exciting wide receiver from a dynasty perspective in the long term. Now, with that being said, obviously you're not getting a ton of production this season. And then going over to tight end, we have the cornerstone asset with Trey McBride, a tight end that you're able to start every single week, regardless of the matchup this year, as well as going into the future already through his bye. So we have Andrews, but we're chilling. We don't necessarily need to think about this. So looking at what this team should be doing, I think you look to make a play to contend this season. Do I think you go about that by trying to trade away, say, Joe Mixon for a 3rd quarterback? Honestly, no. That's something we'd be looking to do if we were rebuilding. I think how things stand right now, you're in a really good spot to actually just look to roll with Love and Herbert the rest of the way. I don't necessarily think you need to make a panic move to get a 3rd quarterback here. And what I would be doing instead is I would actually be looking to bolster up wide receiver just a bit. There are a couple different ways that you can go about this. You could, 1, look to potentially go through and sell our future first and go get an additional wide receiver starter. But the issue is we don't have our 2025 first round pick currently. Now, if we do have a 2025 first, 100%, let's go sell that pick and let's go bring in a wide receiver that you think really could help us contend this season. We'll go through and we'll look at some of the rebuilding rosters. Like if you had a 2025 first and maybe you wanted to send it for George Pickens, a wide receiver that presumably would be an upgrade there at wide receiver 2, and also wouldn't drop off in value on a team that really needs wide receiver the way that we do, I wouldn't fault you at all for making that pivot. However, what I would actually be looking to do instead, assuming we don't have that 2025 first, which the league analyzer is saying that we don't at the moment, and where our first round picks in 2026, and I'm not super confident that this team wants to plan on contending in 2025 because it's very difficult to know what Kamara is going to be next season. It's very difficult to know what Mixon's going to be this next season. Obviously, for the past 3 years, everybody's been worried about these guys with their age kind of falling off, and they've been able to hold off Father Time, and they've been incredible, and they've been the biggest league winners in fantasy this year. But that's not inherently a guarantee when they're another year older next season. So if we're looking at what we potentially want to do, I think it actually is maybe trading away Roma Dunze as that asset that rebuilding teams would absolutely love to have that's going to continue to get better. And maybe look to pivot from Roma Dunze in a 2-for-1 deal. Or not even a 2-for-1 deal. Maybe just going and getting a wide receiver that is a little bit more likely to help us contend this year. Now, obviously, we are charging a premium when we're selling Rome. I'm not saying to sell Rome for pennies and treat it as if it's a redraft league. But here, there should be some teams in your league that are looking to rebuild that could very easily use Roma Dunze. Like, we have Tyreek Hill and Rome ranked similarly in Dynasty. Like, this team here that's 2-9, they have absolutely no reason to be holding on to Tyreek Hill over a player like Roma Dunze. Rome's probably going to be worth more than Tyreek Hill this offseason, just given the nature of dynasty players. So if you could maybe pivot off of Rome and go pick up Tyreek Hill, and maybe also just go through and swing another 2-for-1, swing another swap here if you have that younger asset. The issue is going through and looking for that piece. We don't really have another player that a rebuilding team would really be attracted in trading for. Obviously, that's this team that's rebuilding. They should, in theory, very much be willing to give up McCaffrey. But the issue is, what could we all so offer at running back for McCaffrey. All our running backs are contending assets anyway. So probably not looking to do that. But yeah, if you could maybe pivot off of Rome for Tyreek, I think that could make sense. This team that's rebuilding here, they have London, who obviously is that younger asset that is probably going to be not only helping us win right this second, but at the same time also giving you a little more long-term upside as well, or a lot more long-term upside. I would love to find a way to pivot from Rome to get up to London. Like if you could go through and trade away our 2025 second and 2025 third with Rome Odunze to possibly pivot over to Drake London, I think that'd be an absolute no-brainer. Now, of course, the issue is it's much easier said than done, but I think you could very easily see that helping us this season. It's not like London's going to see a fall in value at all in the offseason. London's set up to be a cornerstone asset. While at the same time, maybe, just maybe, the other team convinces themselves that the second and third is enough to bridge the gap with the long-term value. And then going through and looking at the other 4 and 17, probably not super interested with anybody that he has to offer. The 5 and 16 probably still thinks they're in it. This other 3 and 8 team, Nico Collins, obviously they're probably planning on building around the long term. If we could somehow, some way send Rome for Nico, we would. But then also these other receivers with Smith injured with, if you sold Rome for Higgins, I'd want another piece added in. So I think that's the pivotal piece that we'd be looking to sell, just because for me, again, I don't think you need to worry about adding in an additional quarterback. Maybe that's something we look to do this offseason. I want to give ourselves the ability to rebuild in 2025 if need be. That's not plan A right now, but we definitely want to be holding on to our 2026 first, just in case something does happen. So what I'd be looking to do instead is I'd be looking to maybe pivot off of Romeo Odunze, get the additional wide receiver upgrade that we have for this season, while holding on to the veteran running backs, holding on to the tight ends, and being able to crush and hopefully being able to win this year, while holding on to our 2026 first and giving ourselves a little bit more flexibility with things we could play around with this offseason. But again, I hooked you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So just in case there's anything else that you wanted to send over my way, I would be super happy to take a look at it for you, my friend. But let's move this over to Trebner. Another question here. Start set. We need a tight end and 2 flex spots. We're going to look at Laporta, Hawkinson as our 2 tight ends. I think you go Hawk over Laporta, as painful as it is to say. Going down to the flex, we have no Smith, you have no James Cook, we have no Higgins, we have no London. So it's a very easy spot where really the only options, because you are absolutely screwed, are JSN and Josh Downs. Which I don't want to say we're screwed. These are definitely better flex plays than what I have this week. I'm having to freaking play Waddle. But it just is absolute hell in week 12 with all these guys missing. Now, Elias coming out with our next start set question. Here for the flex, we are looking at Devonta Smith being out, Ray Davis out, Brooks, Wright, Pacheco out. No other option but Jalen Waddle. This is exactly where I'm at with my own team, my guy, where I personally also had to pivot from Devonta Smith to Jalen Waddle. Brutal, brutal spot. It sucks. Waddle has not had a single game with 10 plus fantasy points since week 1. Going over and looking at the underdog projections this week, I'm even afraid to look at them because I already know Waddle is going to be incredibly low. Waddle's at higher, lower 39.5 receiving yards, higher, lower 8 fantasy points. It's a brutal spot. Week 12 freaking sucks. The injuries freaking suck, but it is what it is. I don't think you have another option. And with my own team, I don't think I have another option either, my guy. But let's go ahead and let's see if we had any more questions come in with the site. Then obviously we can pivot back over to the questions in the chat. And also, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen. We live stream every single day. Have not missed a day in like 150 days plus. But Sunday morning streams are by far and away the most important for us. So if you're ever going to drop a like on this live stream, I would kindly ask that you do it now. Let's get that fan on as well. But Longhorns coming out with our next question says, Hokum Mason, Hokum my friend. Since start, are we going to go THCH Hunt NCPNCR? No idea what the hell you're asking here, to be completely honest. I'm assuming that we're going to need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. Looking at running back, we're going to go with the combo of Derrick Henry and James Conner. Wide receiver, we're going to go with Nico Collins and Tyreek Hill or Puka. It doesn't matter because you throw the other wide receiver into the flex. Or actually, I apologize. We have Kareem Hunt in the flex. Okay. Dear God. Dear God. Wide receiver, you go with Puka, Nico, and we hope that Puka is able to overcome a pretty tough matchup here against the Eagles. Running back, you go Henry, Connor. And in the flex, while I would love to play Tyreek Hill, we said it last week with the projections that you had here in this offense. And yet again, you have this offense projecting to be a top 3 offense in the NFL this week. I think we probably would pivot off of Tyreek to get Kareem Hunt, though, because Hunt, you have the best matchup you could ever ask for going up against Carolina. You have no Pacheco, so you should see presumably every touch in this backfield. So we go Hunt over Tyreek. Not super confident with it, though. Now, Black Lion coming out says, I don't know what to do at the flex. So here, running back, for me, Ramondre, Tracy are very comparable. They're both touchdown or bust running backs that won't have massive receiving roles. But the benefit that you have with Ramondre is maybe you have a little more receiving usage and the offense projects to be a little bit better. So then we go ahead and we take Ramondre Stevenson down in the flexes. Terry McLaurin projects to be in the second highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. And then I go Tracy. The other guy you would consider would be Josh Downs. Downs obviously is exciting where he has absolutely just crushed time in. And I mean, he has been extremely consistent even with Anthony Richardson the past 2 weeks. Downs has gotten there the past 2 Richardson games. And also at the same time, if you're looking at the game environment that Josh Downs should be in, it's one where we should have a ton of Anthony Richardson dropbacks. We know that you really can't run the ball against the Detroit Lions. They should be pretty heavy dogs here as well. But I don't know. Tracy get the guaranteed touches. Singletary's just kind of been completely phased out. Now, Ja Rude says Abdullah, Slayton, or Boutte for the flex. Okay. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not super excited to tell anybody here to go through and play Amir Abdullah. I think with Abdullah, this is a running back that more likely than not will have a decent little role because of all the injuries in Las Vegas. But at the same time, it's tough to be super, super excited about it. Knowing that it's a really bad offense and a really tough matchup at the same time. But here, in comparison to like garbage wide receivers off the waivers, I'm fine just going Abdullah. But a Hogan says, hey, Mason, this is my important league. Just traded Brian Robinson Jr. and Flowers for Aaron Jones and Neighbors. I like that move. I think we looked at that trade earlier for you, which I liked. I also have Olave on the IR. I hope to see the pain of the waiver wire this year and why we have some scrubs on the bench. Any trades, waivers, somebody get rest of season. The league is division-based. Well, let's go ahead and let's check this out. And we got to get you off this platform, whatever the hell it is, my guy. You got to get off of here. Yeah, the waiver wire is absolutely brutal here. I guess you have like Cam Akers. The issue with like looking at the waiver wire with how these fantasy sites do it is like it tells you like, oh, these are the best options. Go pick up Trey Palmer. Go pick up Josh Reynolds. Where you have to scroll all the way down. And you can say, actually, I don't know. I guess you got Cam Akers down here at the very bottom. Definitely, it sucks that you can't link this with flockfantasy.com, whatever platform this is, to have a better view of waivers. But this is surprising because there's not a bunch of bench spots with this team. Currently, quarterback, we have the elite option with Jalen Hurts, a quarterback that we can start every single week regardless of what the matchup is. So obviously, very excited on that front. You don't need to roster another quarterback here already through the bye week. Going over to running back, we have Gibbs. And we just traded Brian Robinson for Aaron Jones. So made a flip that, again, I think with Jones, obviously people are concerned about the Cam Akers usage, which is not something to completely overlook. But Aaron Jones should be healthier now. And at the same time, you do have Aaron Jones already through the bye week, where Brian Robinson, you have to deal with him missing in week 14. So we have Aaron Jones here at running back 2 now. Going down to what we have on the bench, we have Estime Spears. So, I mean, I would like to pick up Cam Akers. I think with the Tajee Spears bye week, if you really wanted to drop Spears in favor of Cam Akers, I wouldn't fault you for it. Because, I mean, if you were looking at Spears, even if you were to get the injury to Pollard, all of a sudden, what, Spears is the guy, but in one of the league's worst offenses. At least Minnesota's a decent environment to be in if you were to get that starting job. But that is just something to think about here. Going over to wide receiver, we have Tyreek, Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, and then Amari Pearsall down at the very bottom. So, I mean, it would be great to pick up an additional starter. Obviously, this is a league in which you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. It's a double flex format. So, I mean, I would definitely like to pick up an additional starter if we could. And now the issue is, how do you get there? Is the waiver wire is kind of garbage. It's not like we have additional assets down on the bench that people are going to be very excited to go through and trade for and easily can make a 2-for-1 deal. We have Amari Cooper, who hopefully gives us a little bit of upside here in the long term. So I think post Neighbors trade, you've really done exactly what I'd want to with this team. We have Kraft, we have Taysom, who we can just kind of go back and forth with at tight ends here. We don't have any additional assets that's like, oh, very easily we can make this pivot. We are kind of stuck playing Romeo Doubs this week as well. I don't think you can get away from that. So I wish I had something that we could reasonably say to help out the squad here, but I really like the trade that we made for Neighbors. I would love to pick up an additional wide receiver starter, but in reality, I think we just have to send up a prayer that Amari Cooper gets us there, my guy. But let me make sure I hooked you. Let me hook you up with a free trade question and a free start set question, just in case there's a trade or anything else that you want to send my way. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. And I'm very sorry that I wasn't able to help you out anymore here, my guy. I wish I could have. Now, DK Jones coming out and says, bye week struggles. Who are we going to start? Dear God, we go with Demario Douglas. Slayton has a good matchup, but looks like Neighbors is going to go, so Slayton should be the wide receiver 3 with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. And if you're looking at what we have with Alec Pierce, the usage goes down with Pittman back in. Bateman was injured early in the week. Maybe, just maybe, you see a little bit of Deontay Johnson here. But yeah, I mean, with Douglas, the issue, of course, in New England is they are just going through and they are spreading the ball around to so many different receivers. But let me move this over and answer some of the questions in the live chat. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat right now. I'd be happy to try to get to as many as I possibly can. And obviously, if y'all wanted to tail us with some underdog picks this week, my favorite picks currently on Underdog are going to be Mike Evans to go higher than 55.5 receiving yards and David Montgomery to go higher than 69.5 total yards. Now, of course, I'm an idiot. I get these things wrong literally every single time I bring them up. So should you fall? Debatable. But anyway, if you want to check out any of these picks over there on Underdog Fantasy, you can find the link in the description, in the comment section, in the live chat. If you use promo code FLOCK, you'll get that free Matthew Stafford pick, more than less than half total yard for the game tonight. Plus, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every night as well. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog. Luis says, any news on Ladd McConkey? Last I saw, I didn't have anything. I mean, Ladd is still just a question mark for Monday night. I am assuming that Ladd will be good to go personally. By no means is it a guarantee. And if you are looking at Ladd McConkey, the one saving grace is you do have potential options that you could pivot to if Ladd were to miss, where you do have somebody like Joshua Palmer available on every waiver wire, or if you plan on putting Ladd in the flex spot, you could possibly pivot over to Will Dissly if he's still out there. And yes, hit that like button. Subscribe if you have not done so already. Pitcher Rainen says Goff or Anthony Richardson. Obviously, Anthony Richardson gives you the rushing upside that Goff doesn't. But for me, I'm going to go with the guy that is projecting out to be in the best scoring offense in the NFL this week. They're 8-point favorites here over the Colts. So I'm going to go ahead. I think I'm going to play it safe with Jared Goff. I think Anthony Richardson maybe has a higher ceiling, just given the amount of rushing upside you could get, where if the Colts and A-Rich surprise the world here and they win this game and they drop 30-plus points, then A-Rich would probably make up a much higher percentage of his offensive output than what you'd expect to see with Jared Goff. But of course, with that being said, baseline expectation is that the Detroit Lions are just going to be a much, much better offense than what you have with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Jep Toj says Bucky or Rachaad White. I'm still going to go ahead. I'm going to take Rachaad White over Bucky Irving. Completely understand where you are coming from. However, where it has been a spot where the usage between the two running backs have been very comparable, you're typically expecting the rookie running back to continue to improve as you're coming out of the bye week, or any rookie, of course. And it is a good matchup. And also, you could probably expect that we see some touchdown regression here for Rachaad White in this Bucs offense. But with all that being said, White is the guy that's had their receiving usage. White is the guy that's been scoring the touchdowns as well. So until we see otherwise, you're probably stuck still playing Rachaad White over Bucky Irving. Now, Manchester says, should I stash Quentin Johnston if I plan on playing Ladd? For sure, if you're planning on playing Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston's currently out there on the waiver wire for you, 100% a very easy pickup to make. Really no hesitation in saying so either. Jimmy says Cam Akers or Trey Benson today. I'd probably go ahead and take Cam Akers. If you're looking at both running backs, the last few games, they've had roles where obviously Akers gets the double-digit touches this past week. He gets a receiving touchdown as well. Now, to be honest with that, am I expecting that Cam Akers comes through and he has some massive guaranteed role? Probably not. The thing is, Aaron Jones did get banged up 2 weeks ago, so there's the outside chance that Aaron Jones maybe just wasn't fully healthy this past week. And now, if Aaron Jones is healthier, then at that point, maybe Cam Akers does it does cede some snaps to Jones. If you're looking at Trey Benson, Benson's had a role here over the past 2 weeks in Arizona. But a big thing with that is those games have just been absolute blowouts where it is very difficult to know exactly what we should expect. I mean, we can go ahead and we can pull this up on Underdog. So we are looking at Cam Akers, who is higher, lower, 34.5 total yards. And Trey Benson, who is higher, lower, 20.5 rushing yards. So again, I would go Akers. I think you have reasons to believe that both running backs see their roles kind of shrink back this week, though. 20 says he sent a question in at the buzzer on flockfantasy.com. Let's go ahead and let's pull this up, my guy. You know, I appreciate you. Excited to check this out. Cali Kid got one in as well. Another longtime member of the flock. We got two pretty much longest members of the flock out here right now on the site. But anyway, Cali Kid says, what's up, Mason? Just a little help this week. Really appreciate you and wishing you the best of luck, my guy. I'm James Conner, absolute must-start running back, absolute perfect matchup, and perfect game environment. I think we go with Javonte here as well, where if you're looking at Javonte Williams, the matchup, when I said perfect matchup, I was more so thinking about Javonte going up against the Raiders. Now, again, I do maybe want to be just a little hesitant if we are looking at him and acknowledge the fact that this is a spot where he only had 14 opportunities this past week, so it is difficult to know what he's going to look like in comparison to Audric Estime, of course. Now, going over and looking at what we have at wide receiver, I think Puka, obvious locked and loaded guy. We're going to go Evans here as well. They're telling us that he should have zero hesitation or zero limitations. Now, going over to the tight end, you just jam in Cade Otton. And then down in the flex, for me personally, I would take Marvin. Actually, Marvin Harrison Jr. and JSN are extremely close. I would go with both of them over Bucky Irving. If you look at my flex rankings this week, I personally have Harrison and JSN ranked back-to-back. I think you can do you and go in any direction that you want. I asked the live chat previously, I think maybe this was last night, who they preferred between JSN and Marvin Harrison Jr., and they pretty much went split down the middle 50-50 as well. So I do think it is kind of up to you here, my guy. Now, moving this over to our next question here. This one coming out from 20. Says, suggestions at running back 2 in the flex. So we have no Brees. I go with Dowdle over Eckler. I know Eckler obviously had a really nice role as a receiver this past week. But if you look at the expanded sample, really outside of the games that Brian Robinson's missed in this past week, Eckler's volume has really been down, and the receiving usage hasn't been anything close to what you had a week ago. And then going over to the flex, we're definitely going to go with the receiver here. I think I go with Calvin Ridley. If we're comparing Calvin Ridley to like Jacoby Myers, Ridley, you don't have to compete with Bowers. Ridley should have the majority of targets in his offense, or he should be the target leader. And at the same time, you have a better matchup where Myers, you do have to go up against Denver. And then Dell, I'm just not that interested in a game environment in which the Texans probably don't have to throw the ball a ton, as well as you have Nico Collins 100% good to go. But FG23 says, JSN, Neighbors, or Ladd McConkey full PPR format. So obviously not super excited with Neighbors, given the fact that you do have DeVito under center. But it is a really good matchup that you have going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So for me, I would go ahead. I'll take the receiver that's leading the NFL in targets per game. I will go with Malik Neighbors. But let's see our next question. Eckler or Dowdle? We are going to go with Dowdle over Eckler. Again, I don't view Eckler is in the much, much better offense. But I think Brian Robinson expands his role this week, and I think we see Eckler looking a lot more similar to what you had at the beginning of the season. But your boy is about to piss himself right now. I've had to go pee over the last 30 minutes. I've been trying my hardest to make it through this. So much love. Really do appreciate y'all. I know this is the week from hell. You can probably tell I'm very upset myself with my own starting lineup this week. So it is what it is. Hopefully we're able to pull out the dub. Hopefully I'm not so much of a pissy boy come tonight. Obviously, we'll be recapping everything that happens with the games tonight in the video. So really hope I get to see you there. Hope I win, so I'm not such a crybaby next week. And yeah, week 13, we're not having to deal with these injuries and these buys. But much love. Really do appreciate you, and really hope I get to see you out with the video later tonight.